2, 1. Hello and welcome everybody to the Crypto Mining Show, your one-stop shop for all cryptocurrency news from the perspective of a cryptocurrency miner. Today we have two cryptocurrency miners on here. Joining me is Mr. BBT, Bitsbetrippin, Mr. Carter from the Bitsbetrippin YouTube channel. You can check out the link to it down in the description below. So thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, man. Awesome. I'm glad to be back. I haven't had anything in about 8 weeks and we've been super busy and I can't wait to get into it, man. It's good to be online again.
Sweet. So today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin mining consulting firm Saber 56 raising $35 million. And I think, Carter, you said that you had some insight on that for us. So maybe we can dig deeper than just the CoinDesk article, which will be awesome. We're also going to be talking about the Montana Senate passing a bill protecting crypto miners, which I think is a pretty big deal right now. I know we talked about Texas legislature being proposed that appears to be very similar to this, except in this particular case, it's the proposed law passed. So in this case, it is already passed in Montana. And then the big news, we're going to be talking about crypto and Bitcoin miners rebranding and diversifying to survive. We're also going to be talking about surviving outside of that, because there's basically two approaches here that have been going on, where you have a lot of the GPU miners kind of repurposing to high-powered computing. And then on the flip side of that, there's this idea where you shouldn't be diversifying too much and you should focus on just the Bitcoin mining. So getting your opinion on that, Bits, would be awesome. And then we're also going to be talking about the Bitcoin halving in 2024, which is, you know, projected to be one of the most impactful halvings since the inception of Bitcoin. And I tend to agree with that. I think personally, and we'll get into it a little bit more in depth, but I think it'll be more impactful when we start to see the new emissions get closer to the actual cost from a fee perspective, right? So once the block reward starts to be 50-50 with the fees is where I think we really see things change for Bitcoin. But we're going to get into all of that and more right after a word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is CoinLedger. CoinLedger understands that crypto tax reporting can be difficult and is here to help. CoinLedger integrates with popular crypto applications and exchanges like Coinbase and MetaMask. Seamlessly import your CoinLedger tax reports into TurboTax and feel at ease. For a limited time, check the description on this video for a chance to win a free CoinLedger tax report. Get started for free today at coinledger.io by following the links in the description. Use promo code SONOFATECH for 10% off. All right, and welcome back. So before we get into it, where have you been, Bits? It's been a while.
Yeah, man, it's been busy. So, you know, a few months back, we had been, you know, actually about the last year, we've been working on getting this build that we've been doing, 5 megawatt build. We finally got to the point that we could actually start to deploy stuff. So the team's been super busy on getting all of the, you know, logistics and everything in order on that and getting things, you know, put into the box there. We also expanded a lot when it comes to like consulting work and helping other farms optimize, especially in this kind of downturn. You know, we had a lot of different contacts over the years with folks as they've, you know, migrated from some of the Ethereum mining, have started reallocating some of that power to Bitcoin mining, some L7 stuff, Kadena miners, you know, just really ASICs, you know, and as a GPU, old school GPU bro, it hurts me. It still hurts me, my dude, to see, you know, us kind of rescend back into that like 2014, 2015 era, right before Ethereum. And you didn't have much to really mine. Dogecoin, everything started moving to ASICs. There wasn't really much out there. Vertcoin, a few other things. But working with some of those folks that had made investments, they had decent power rates, and they were trying to figure out, you know, what do I do with that? So we've had quite a few calls related to that to kind of help them either find miners now that things have came back down at lower in price. You're still talking $13, $15 per terahash for some of those units. So we've been really busy with that stuff, taking quite a few calls related to that. And then just with the build, there's a video that's going to come out with me like I had, luckily I wasn't really hurt, but I had an injury. I fell off of one of our tractor trailers that came to deliver some units, and I like damaged my leg, and I was like limping, and it was like really hard to kind of get to do anything besides the critical path that I was on. So that's going to come out. I have a whole little video on that whole scenario, but that was right before CES. We were trying to prep for CES. It took a pretty large team out there. And to get a heartbeat of what, we're in a bear market, what's the market going to do? I like going out there to see, where the mindset each year you see, hey, it's blockchain. And then it became cryptocurrency that became back in the hotness, and then it was, fintech and FinOps and all these other different things that were happening with it. You get to see where the capital's being deployed, right? Not necessarily the mining, not necessarily the core Bitcoin or cryptocurrency development thing. You get to see where the other capital is coming in on top of it. Who's building what are people excited for, which is essentially your participants that are using the networks, right? We're upholding them as a miner and doing the security, but who's leveraging it and who's trying to build on it? So CES is real good for that, because you have like the verticals that are in there for that. So we brought a team out there, try to get a heartbeat on what's going on. Is there any new products coming out there? The last video that we had showed some of that. Finally, it took me a month to kind of finally get it out, but really it's just been that grind, getting the machine up, and then just getting things in order to where we can now kind of calm it down and start showing you guys how that build went. Instead of trying to show you as we did it, because we had to work through a lot of like little issues, man. I'll be honest with you. It took a little bit of cycles to figure out some stuff. And as we were learning that, and navigating to get things online, we were capturing it. Luckily, we recorded it. We recorded the, folks that were suggesting changes and that kind of stuff. Which kind of brings me into that Saber 56. I've talked to Phil Harvey. He's one of the key people there. We've talked to them. They built a lot of stuff, and just getting some, pointers on just the design, and working some pointers from that with them.
Why don't we hop into that article, and then maybe you can we'll get the basis so everybody gets an idea, and you can get us some more details on it.
Yeah, sure.
And then I'm excited for all that CES content from, y'all's perspective, from the mining perspective, or just cryptocurrency perspective in general. You don't usually get like a lot of that content, right? It's typically, the Linus Tech Tips and that sort of thing that go out there, and they're looking more from the PC gaming perspective, or you got the Marquise Brownlees that are going for the, the mobile perspective. So from a blockchain perspective, that's really interesting. What I did want to ask on that note, was there really anything, ordinals has been a big topic here recently, which is, the NFTs on Bitcoin. Was that something that was present out there at all, or?
No, I think it was, ordinals came kind of right after. I mean, they probably were developing at that moment in time, but I think it was just after it. And I have a pretty decent relationship. I mean, I've known Eric Verga and most of the team over at Luxor for a long time. Since essentially their inception. We've been working to try to talk with them on kind of how they're handling that in the ecosystem, because they took a lot of heat for that first mint of a block, right, of it. There was a huge section. There was an entire like zone within the CES. It's not the Sands Expo. They call it something now. I think it's the Venetian Expo, but they had a section for metaverse NFTs. That was just, that section was it. So it was a lot of products that had corresponding NFTs included with them. So it was a lot of fusion of physical with like a QR code on the bottom, like you could scan it and get the private key or the public key to that NFT, right? And then with a card that would be sold with the product that would then have the virtual version of it. And then how that kind of interlacing of like AR, VR, you can explore your, avatar thing that you just got. So a lot of that kind of fusion and showing how you could create unique identifiers to particular objects, that sort of stuff out at CES, showing, a lot of interest on kind of mixing those two worlds. There was a couple game companies out there showing that they were working on Polygon, trying to have like a corresponding like market for their goods, using that network. So you'd be playing like an MMO, but then you could trade out of the MMO because you need everything really concise and fast, right? It's not, you don't want to be tied. Even the fast layer 2s are not fast enough for like an MMO. But then you could trade it into like this window that then would place it into a web, to where you could access it from a web browser and then trade in this whole outer market. It was an interesting idea, right? You could trade, and the whole point of it was like, they're like, we're going to create sharded servers. And our idea is that we can create unique items per server. So it was a kind of a different thing, right? So you'd have a unique thing from one server and be able to trade across servers using that interface. And I was like, this is why I go out there, right? I'm like, it's hard to find on the internet that kind of stuff because there's so much noise. So seeing it viscerally, like in their intention, and that they're they're not trying to pump and dump, right? They're trying to use the tech, right? So it's like, seeing that kind of fusion with that tech gives you a different perspective from an application standpoint. But yeah, a lot of there were also products. Some of the last video we just showed, I showed a little bit, but it was showing some of the product development on like the mining side. So there's a couple companies, one trying water cooling, so on like the S19s, where you'd actually replace the plates, and it actually has a water cool loop. So it's kind of like, you put on like a CPU cooler. They had like this demo that wasn't really running. It was just kind of showing the water loop. And I was like, oh, how are you guys going to filter that and all this? But, they were trying. It was $500 kit. Their name is Cypher Power. They were cool dudes, been in the space for a long time. And then there was fog hashing. They've been out there a couple times. I actually have their unit behind in the room. We haven't deployed it. I bought their unit the first year I saw it, and it's been sitting in a crate in our back room. We just haven't hit it.
You got to get on that. I messaged him about trying to get one from him, but I didn't have the capital to really just buy one right now. So unfortunately, kind of had to hold back there. Ordinals, I do want to talk about with you maybe near the end, especially as it impacts like the difference between, Bitcoin ordinals and, our traditional, how NFTs currently function and the benefits that ordinals can bring into that, right? I find a super interesting topic, but I still have a lot of research to do on them. It's kind of hit this week, the past couple of weeks, and I've been trying to read as much as possible, but it's a lot. Let's get into this though. Bitcoin mining consulting firm Saber 56 raises $35 million to build 150 megawatt of hosting sites. The company is moving into the hosting business and says it already has a waiting list of clients. Saber 56, a company that consults miners on the development and operations of facilities, has raised $35 million to build its own hosting sites, aiming to have 150 megawatts of energy capacity ready by the end of the year. Hosting is a service that data centers provide to crypto miners that want to run their mining rigs without having to build the infrastructure themselves. The first 4 sites will total 115 megawatts and be located in Wyoming and Texas, where construction has already begun, according to a press release. The capacity will be built in 7 megawatt to 15 megawatt of monthly increments, with the first batch coming online in mid-March. Company CEO Phil Harvey said. The $35 million investment is coming primarily from private individuals, he added. Hosting space for mining rigs has been in short supply over the past few months, as few new sites were coming online and capital for development ran dry. The bankruptcies of major hosting firms like Compute North and Core Scientific heightened the supply issue. Saber 56 will offer competitive pricing between 6.8 cents to 7.2 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity consumed, which right now, just as a side note, which we'll talk about here more in a second, we really are getting close to more of the average electricity cost being about, it's gone up about maybe like 30% since like last cycle, what we're accustomed to. I was going over that, and it looks like, especially for home miners, you're looking at good pricing being like 13 cents a kilowatt hour now, unfortunately. For comparison, Core Scientific increased its hosting price to just 10 cents in October, as soaring natural gas prices increased its electricity cost. Harvey declined to specify the price of the fixed rate electricity contracts that Saber 56 has signed. I would assume that. And he has already has a waiting list of clients, said the press release. Harvey specified that it is comprised mostly of companies and individuals already close to the company, and the contracts are in the 10 to 50 megawatt range, in addition to its projections to have 150 megawatt online By the end of 2023, the company plans to keep adding 150 megawatt of capacity annually for the next 4 years. The profits made from initial investments will be enough to continue this further development, Harvey said. Quote, I'm not interested in taking over some shit show that people are trying to sell because they're going bankrupt and can't run their operations, end quote, said Harvey, responding to a question from CoinDesk about why his company has chosen not to purchase an existing development from a distressed miner, which I think is going to be the key point here. One of the things I've talked about, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, is utilizing, your knowledge of the Bitcoin cycle to set yourself up into a position to start, or a strong cash position at the height of the cycle, if you possibly can, to where you have the ability to start building out infrastructure during the bear market. Kind of want to get your thoughts on that. And then obviously some more details as to what their strategy is here, because this seems to me to be a sign of success to a certain extent, right? Especially in the current market.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, so I've talked before with Harvey on a couple things, opportunities and stuff. And I mean, they're a smart group of folks. They built a lot of, I mean, if you look at Saber 56's website, it shows, that they have been responsible of consulting and building out close to like 700 megawatts. So they have quite a bit of experience. They have a canned solution that they use that they can manage. So I would tackle first, like taking over another operation. A lot of that has nothing to do with necessarily the operation, like the design of it or whatever. It could be if it's a bad design, but like it all comes down to where they're getting their power and what the power rate is. So like going to power, yeah.
Like
so if there's
yeah, so that would be my question. So if you have the potential of basically having to take over that purchase power agreement as well.
Yeah, if they have a PPA, or if it's just some places have just a rate, like what we have here is a public rate that I worked with the local power companies here to try to establish. Right, I went. You can go see the board meeting notes that I went and presented at and said, here's what we need to operate, and I fought for a rate based on a energy excess that we have here. We have a lot of wind power here, and a lot of them are turned off. So I was like, how do we turn those on? And then we establish a rate that makes sense, and then educated on just the rationale of load balancing, essentially what the capability is. And then when we would need to curtail during demand curves, we could shut off and flat. We were effectively bringing the stack up to what close to what peak is. And then when we need to turn off, when demand comes up, we turn off. Right. So we're able to establish a much more aggressive rate because of that kind of solution. But it took all that agreement. So we made it to where it wasn't a PPA. Where we just said we would have a certain amount online guaranteed. Like we have to hold 1.5 in our current situation, and we can have no more than 5 megawatts, which is a smaller operation compared to what they're trying to do, right? But it works the same kind of way. You can either get an established rate based on what size you're trying to get to, and then some are power purchase agreements. We're saying you are going to do this for 5 years because we want to have the guarantee. Those are a little more risky because how volatile Bitcoin is, right? So if that rate is not immediately lower than the majority of what people are paying, then you're going to be one of the first out, right? And that's kind of where you're looking at people that are reliant on natural gas, have stuff that their energy mix isn't to where it's going to be indicative of the market, and they're going to kind of get unbeknownst to them, they're going to get where the power company is just going to have to charge them, and they're going to have this secondary rate. They're like, hey, our energy rate's this, but now we have this other kind of transmission cost because we have to get power from over here, and now it's costing more. So a lot of it comes down to what can you get that rate established. It has nothing really to do with the site, but you may be able to get into where a site is okay and it's already built. There's a lot to gain from something that's already built, right? You got shelving, racking, you got all the wiring, everything's ready to go. It's just like, can you get the power rate there? But then there's also, if you're doing something at that scale, you got to consider of like, you've built a process that you've trained people on, and now it's a different building and it's a different cycle, and they don't have the right stuff. So, Saber builds their own stuff, right? They have a design that they go and do, and they've optimized it over years. So it makes sense that they'd want to spend their own. And they're doing it in a distressed market where they can probably pick up some cheap, not just cheaper miners, but cheaper parts as these other facilities are looking to dismantle or whatever. So from transformer, switch gear, all those kind of things. So
Right.
Phil's a smart dude. I would imagine that he's got a good plan, and he's probably got a decent rate to be able to make sense for them to go ahead and build a greenfield their own solution. Versus
and
buying
having a
something already
hosting
existing.
cost that's lower than what the current average electricity cost across the U.S. is pretty good. I mean, that does mean that they probably did negotiate something good there. I did have a couple questions, because there is, when we were talking about, negotiating these deals, et cetera, the type of power company also plays a huge role here, right? Because you can have distributors that aren't generating their own energy, and that negotiation is going to work out a little bit differently, because they may be dependent on whoever is producing the electricity for the rates, which is going to change things up. And then you have different structures, like here in Texas, we have co-ops, for example, where they act a little bit differently, because they're beholden to their members being all of their customers, right? Or we have, nonprofits as an example of some of these that are running, or you have like a for-profit energy company. So there's a lot of nuance to all of this, and you probably find different leverage points depending on what kind of company you're negotiating with, right?
Yeah, so it's how many people are on that value stream that are taking pieces, right? So you got a lot of things. Rarely do you have somebody that is the creator of the power, the transmission of the power, the distribution, meaning like switching it out, stepping it down from high voltage down. Like having somebody that owns that whole value cycle is hard and rare. Most of them are agreements on like transmission, because they're coming from nuclear or coal or natural gas, and then creating that energy mix for whatever substation you end up finding. So like for our instance, it's a co-op, it's a 509c, it's which is a nonprofit. So really it comes down to, they got to cover their bases. So they have hedged agreements over long periods. But when we were going for this, we had worked with them, who worked with the larger entity around here. It was British Petroleum, BP. And it was a matter of like, can you turn on these windmills if we are going to hold the demand at this level? So you start to uncover kind of like what's in the realm of possibility. I think it first starts with, is there excess, or is there potential for excess, to where even at peak, they had overbuilt, or they don't have the transmission ready. So like here in the Illinois, and into Missouri, you have a lot of, earmarked like bills that had built all of this wind power with the concept that over a 10-year period, they'd be able to get transmission out to the edges. And that stuff just takes a lot of time, because you're going across people's property, and it's like every 10 miles, you're like dealing with like 8 different people. And you're like, well, it looks like we got to make a left up 2 miles and then go over, because this person's not going to let us go. And there's added costs and all this stuff. So now you have this excess, because it's easy to throw up the windmills, and they have nowhere to go with it. So it's like finding that was lucky, because it was kind of near where I was at, but like it was just understanding, okay, where is the leverage points that people at the end of the day, they've already made the sunk cost investment, like let's turn it on. And then we'd have it on demand, and then we can come down on like peak times, right? So it was really a learned, lessons learned of trying to like negotiate with them, find out which power company it was, and then which ones are willing to talk with you, right? And I found it, I look at the smaller co-ops or smaller shops, and their motives are a little different, like versus like for profit or like a big public utility. They're smaller and they're easier to talk to, and seeing what's in the realm of possible. That starts with that first.
I think that's good insight. If you were going to start picking, a geographical location, taking into consideration the value that co-ops have, right? Across the board, it's a little bit different. I mean, if you go the route of like the flare gas stuff that was going on, but that kind of, I think that was impacted a little bit negatively with the increased cost of natural gas, right? So,
well, yeah, it depends. So if it's near a refinery, which is taking crude or some other, it hasn't getting to the point of like natural gas extraction or hydrogen production or anything that's like a gas form. If it's like a crude and they're making diesel and then they're making fuel oils and all these other things, there's byproducts and they flare that off. If you can grab it at the flare point and put instead of burning it into the air, just running it right into a generator, and you bring in, a 1.3 megawatt generator, then now you can put like single containers there and just really expose this already thing that you were going to just flare off. Instead, you're just running it as an energy source, and now you're filtering the expended gas. So natural gas, kind of a little different thing, just because now you're talking compression, you're talking another process. And typically natural gas was a lot cheaper. I mean, we had an LPE truck here for a little bit here that I bought, and I was able to get liquid propane, which is still part of that process, for $1.49 a gallon, which is way cheaper than paying it was like $3.50, $3.80 a gallon for vehicles. So I was looking at like, well, is there any propane production around here? Because it's a lot cheaper, and maybe it's we can look into that. But there's just a lot more process on that, and it's a lot more maintenance. I feel for the guys that are in that oil business, oil and gas business, and it's like it's I put it in the same realm as like extreme immersion type of thing, where if I'm just hooked up to the grid and I'm getting a decent rate, way easier. Right. If I have this whole other operation that's processing things, it's a moving part, it's an engine, I have a whole other level of expense that I normally wouldn't have with the rest of the mining. So even if you're able to get your cost way down for your power creation, let's say a penny, what's the sunk cost and the engineer and maintenance cycles on that motor and all that? So then it's all a bottom line kind of calculation at the end of the day. So it might be something that's good for 3 years, and maybe they're in for 3, and then, okay, now I got to maintenance and buy a new, $3 million piece of equipment. It's an interesting kind of dynamic that I think over time we'll figure out if that was good. Yeah. But yeah, I like renewable. Like solar is hard because solar only lasts for so long. It can offset some cost, but wind is strong.
Push for solar is always interesting, because if I mention mining to a normal person, they're like, just get solar. And I'm like, it's not that simple. I got to basically double the size and then have batteries to run them whenever the solar's not cranking, and that's an extra expense, and it's a lot of extra work, more parts, right? That sort of thing going on. So as far as core, or not core scientific, but as far as Saber 56 here, one of the things that I thought was interesting, and we can kind of wrap it up here on this particular topic, but the $35 million investment is coming primarily from private individuals, he added. This is kind of a breakaway from what a lot of the rest of the industry definitely did through the bull run, and probably for good reason, because you had a lot fail, and it was because they were kind of beholden to as a public company. Do you think that that's a strategic move intentionally by them?
Yeah, I mean, so people look for different ways to deploy capital. And you could have a group of folks that just have lost confidence. I mean, when Genesis Holdings and, some of the institutions here in the US, I mean, FTX US, people could be like, oh, it's a shitcoin casino over in FTX, but like US had to go through regulatory stuff to stay compliant. They had books they had to keep related to that. People looking at, purchasing coin, versus trying to mint coin, totally different kind of concept. There's also some individuals, I mean, we've talked to some individuals that are just like, they like the basic understanding of capturing it not to confuse with Coinbase, the company, but the Coinbase of the minting of the product. As the inflation comes in, you're the first stop, right?
And that's I do want to pause you there real quick, because this is a good one that I think a lot of people get mixed up on, especially when they're reading articles, distinguishing between Coinbase and the company Coinbase. You want to kind of give us the elaborate on that more? Yeah.
People understand. Yeah. So when you successfully win a block, there's a mechanism. I'll try to make this simple. There's essentially the minting process as part of the distribution of the coins. You'll look at the coin base where the coins are originally were created from. So like in Bitcoin, every 10 minutes, if we hit a 10-minute block time, those 6.25 coins are going to have their first distribution to whoever creates that block. They've won the nonce. They can now create a block. They're issued out those new coins. First positional move for those coins, all those Satoshis. People look at, there are a group of folks that look at that as like, that's the purest form of coin, right? There's no history. You don't have to worry about any other kind of issues, like if it went through Silk Road or any kind of other history with the coin from like a chain analysis, chain analytics standpoint. And they're like, these are going to be all coins should be fungible, right? They all, like, you shouldn't look at any, like, I don't look at any of the coins. Satoshi is a Satoshi is a Satoshi, but there are, federated companies, investors that were like, I don't want to take zero risk that coin had went through anything because I own a company. And then somebody will look at our stack and say, hey, that went through wherever. You guys are buying coins from whoever. So they look at it like, I want the cleanest version of coins that I can get. I'd rather mine them, spend the money on mining, and have a fresh stack, right? So you have some investors that want to do that for privacy, for all kinds of reasons, because they don't want to associate and pay fees to a custodial to then move it into maybe a custodial wallet or move it out to their wallet and then have to do all this stuff related to that. While the community and the government is figuring out how things are going to work, from registrations and stuff. So when I look at private individuals doing that, I'm looking at it like they're trying to find a partner that can help them build a farm. And then that money is being converted over to go to Bitcoin, right? So they're just using it in that way. And that's their right to do, so I think that it comes down to the person that's searching to deploy their capital, find somebody that can do it, and
it's an interesting philosophical point there too, just kind of a parallel that I find interesting. I've been reading, or I just finished the 48 Laws of Power. And one of the things it talks about in there is like paying full price for everything and never taking a discount, because at the end of the day, that can put you in a compromised position. You're beholden to that individual that you took the discount from, or it could have come through an illegal means or whatever that may be. And the idea that you're going to go through the extra effort to mine the Bitcoin to make sure that you have that clean, basically completely non-KYC, clean of any kind of past history to it, is kind of that same concept to a certain extent. And I thought that was kind of, I heard you talk about that before, and I really like that point. Yeah.
And I mean, there's luckily it hasn't got to this. And as a miner of coins, right, the idea of like, call it color coins or coins that have like green history, and then some that have yellow history, and then the ones that are just absolutely red. Like there is a process out there, like it or not, that's out there where if, let's say you have like I'll give you a perfect example. I had an old donation wallet address from the channel from back when I started in 2013. I had a couple donations. I think it probably was like 0.5 of a Bitcoin, right? Which was half a Bitcoin, which was not bad. Well, some of those dustings that came in were from various sources, BTCE, things that are considered, negative exchanges, straight from Silk Road, those kind of coins that, it's just somebody donated, they like the channel, whatever. At one point, I bring that up, I send it over to Coinbase, right? First thing, flag. Chain analysis says, whoa, bad. I have to disclose, hey, look at my info underneath my channel from 2013. Same wallet address, bro. Like it's a donation address. So, but I have to go through this whole process to get that. And then that goes into their mix. And then if I come back out of Coinbase, now I'm going to get some other mix of coins, right?
And this is really
they're essentially doing the cleansing process
for our audience right now too, where we do have a lot of people in the chat right now that do are content creators as well. Lots of good ones here. Make sure you guys check everybody out. I've been trying to link them as they come in, but to you guys in particular, a good point here is keep your donation addresses separate from your mining addresses. Do not mine to the same address that you're accepting donations to, because you can put yourself in a compromised position here. And that's a very good point that you make.
Yeah, it's just kind of one of those things you'd never think that's going to hit you, and then it stops, and it's just like, oh, dude, I obviously was not doing that. This is a donation address. You can see it all over the web. And, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be able to go through Chainalysis. I'm Reactor certified. I know the system in the back end side. I understand on how they put things together. There's OSINT data in there, which is open source intelligent data, just like where it tries to splice the internet of how if this address has ever been out there, if it's been parsed or scraped from the internet. So you can kind of get some chain of custody of how that got put in place. But like, really it comes down to just being able to, you know, as a miner and you're starting from scratch, it really kind of just limits your exposure to, as the industry and governments around the world are figuring out how they're going to become participants, not how they're going to control it. I mean, I've had many conversations, both on the government side with leaders in the civ side, of like, just trying to make sure that everybody understands you're a participant. Even the government would be a participant. They don't own it, right? So, and then within that, is there going to be a framework to interact on exchange, which is really what we talk about when we're talking about KYCing and all that, the exchange of tokens. That's where that kind of connection points are.
Yeah.
But like, there's an entire other ecosystem where people never go through that. Will never go through that. And, you know, are going to get free, you know, just mine coins. Well, they're going to deploy their capital in other ways, right?
And speaking of that, it's going to become a lot easier in places like Montana because of this legislation. So let's go over this real quick. Montana Senate passes bill protecting crypto miners. The legislation will likely upend a I don't know that word. Missoula County. Is that how I say that? Is that the right county?
Missoula.
All right. Zoning law that was one of the first in the U.S. to target the mining industry. The Montana State Senate passed a bill on Thursday protecting crypto mining or miners from a range of possible actions against the industry. The proposed law passed 37-13 in the Senate and will go to the state's House for its approval. So I guess it does have one more step through the House, but it sounds pretty, I mean, that majority sounds pretty guaranteed to me at least. But the bill protects at-home mining, prevents discriminatory utility rates for miners, and stipulates that crypto used as a payment will not be subject to additional taxes. All of these things are absolutely monumental. I mean, if we're talking, I think the biggest one here really is the discriminatory rates against miners, as we saw like in Washington state, for example, where you know, you're seeing, and we're going to talk about this more too, is a big reason for GPU miners to redefine their workloads to high-powered computing is purely due to the fact that it falls into different electricity rates in some states and some jurisdictions, like it does in Washington state. So protecting miners from that in particular here is fantastic. I think.
You know, I think they get it. And there's a good chance that some of them may have been minors, right? So the amount of interaction I've had over the years is surprising to me, of like how many people in different walks of life, different you know, positions, jobs, they got lost on the internet one day and saw one of our videos and was like, I could try that. I have a computer and a graphics card. And I always tell people this is the biggest reason why GPU mining will never ever die completely, is there will always be networks there that, one, support them. Two, it's like the easiest gateway into understanding on how the security model works as an individual participant.
Right. And so, I think it's a gateway into understanding how assets work. Actually revenue generating assets at a level that the common person can afford, which is
correct.
So important. You can start
and just how to
understanding it.
interact with the ecosystem without having to go to an exchange and buy, right?
Right.
I'm like somebody, I get a lot of people like, oh, GPU mining is dead. I see some of the people in the chat saying GPU mining is dead. It's like, well, if you're in it just purely for trying to harvest profit, and not a participant in the ecosystem that you can maybe leverage some of that with, and understand the other elements. I mean, I see, you know, Dan Keller in here from Flux. I mean, just what they're building and having, you know, decentralized, you know, compute and storage and being able to actually host things on, you know, the other parts of that infrastructure and be part of it from a mining standpoint. There's folks that I've helped set up just small rigs because they've bought some Flux and they wanted to learn how to deploy, you know, into that ecosystem, spinning up a VM. And they're like, well, hell, I'll just pay my rental rate for that network by having these two GPUs run, right? Well, there now you have a participant, and they didn't have to go through a whole bunch of stuff to try to buy that coin. They can just earn it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're providing structure for the network when it comes to a security standpoint, and they're earning the yield that they're deploying in the ecosystem. I think that getting back into that kind of understanding and grassroots approach in GPUs. What the whole reason why I made a channel in 2013 was that, like, you can literally just start this, and then the morning when you wake up, you have coin. And then what can you do with that coin? And it's kind of nice where it starts small. It's like starting a new, I always say this, like if you're starting an ARC server or you're starting a video game, some of the reasons why you always restart that server is that grind in the beginning is some of the funnest time, right? You're just starting to understand the way the thing works and trying to build something small. You have a whole plethora of things you could do, but like it's an individual that can do it and start to understand without a huge amount of risk, right? Like, you have a few coins, you can try to deploy it. It wasn't a huge risk. It was a couple of cards. You're paying, you know, it's like entertainment at that point.
And it scales, right? Like a GPU, it scales. Like in a bear market right now, you could probably pick up like a 5700 XT for like $150 used somewhere and start to understand that. You know, you start to try to get into ASICs or something along those lines, and that barrier to entry automatically goes up tenfold. And you're not able to start participating, to your point. And the thing that you get out of participating is not just the coin, but also the knowledge for when it is profitable again, right? And we can talk about that. Like, people can argue whether or not GPU mining will be profitable again. I'm of the mindset it will be, mainly because I've been through a couple cycles now. You know, you've been through more than me. You've been the longest in this. What I would say is everything that you learned starting at that base level of building a couple GPU mining rigs is what led you to the success that you have today. And if you guys aren't aware, Bits is extremely successful in this, and he's maintaining it through a bear market. So understand that what you're doing is not investing in making that return right now. You're investing in the knowledge to make that return and be capable later on.
Yeah, and it branches you into so many things. So like, we have mining. I'm still mining. We're still mining both. It was a lot smaller operation on the GPU side, larger now that we can mine at some level of scale with the ASIC side. But there's a lot of other things that we're doing in the ecosystem with regards to consulting, helping other people on board to understand that aspects in space, development, working on you know, understanding where we can go into the space when it comes to deploying NFTs. That I'm like learning a lot on the development side, setting up an IDE just for that environment, for I can learn more on that and try to be a participant in the ecosystem, not just that. So there's been people that have came in, kind of got into the mining aspect, understood it, turned into developers, turned into other things. So it is
turned into Linux administrators, right? Understanding how GitHub works and like it puts you straight into there, understanding basic Linux command line, all of that sort of stuff, how to stand up nodes, how, you know, network security, right? Like all of these things, networking, cybersec, all these, there's all these individual pieces. And then it goes beyond that. Like you're talking about now, like business management, right? And cutting deals and actually going out there and having to do that portion of it. There's just a all these skills translate to the rest of society and the economy, right? It's not like you learn
Yep.
these and it's a moot cost. Like at the end of the day, you come out of it with something.
Yeah, you meet a lot of people. The community, especially the GPU mining community, has always been, and that's, I mean, part of the reason why I originally tried to make the channel back in 20. Well, I started trying to make it in 2012 and wasn't still fully understood and had the confidence to try to just, fell in front of people type of thing. And then by 2013, I was like, you know what? Like, this is the way I'm doing it, right? Like, right, wrong, or indifferent, here's how I build a rig, right? And then here's what was successful for us. And then we get a lot of feedback, and there was this like closed loop kind of initially with just the folks that were able to find it because it was a small channel.
Mm-hmm.
And then finding that that's okay, right? You're just saying, this is how I've learned, this is what I'm doing, and getting that community built of people that are like, well, I'm trying this too, and I found another way. And the same thing on the power side, like what we're sharing, with like co-ops and stuff. Like, it's critical that if you get into this space and you do want to communicate, that you're part of forums, you're going to meetups, you're meeting other people in the space. People always ask me like, how do I even start? I'm like, dude, like, here's 50 videos, lean it down to some that are only a couple minutes, try to understand some basics on it, and then go to a meetup. Go somewhere where other people are going to congregate, spend a couple hours there, get a coffee, understand this space, and then somewhere in there, is a really strong community that are all energetic of changing fundamental things, changing maybe government things, changing all these different aspects of the way we interact in this current world. And I think it's such a positive force. That's why I'm always like, people are, aren't you down, man? The prices are down. It looks like there's train wrecks everywhere. World's going to nuts. I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, we got a lot of things going on. We're trying to move the needle. I go to CES. I see a lot of positive stuff. I see corporate, like, mind you, there's the issues with corporate companies too, but I see the innovation and modernization of those companies starting to realize that this stuff is fundamental. Fidelity Capital, Coinbase coming out with the layer 2 stuff, right? People are investing money and time on building on this ecosystem, some of which we can partake on the security side, just running code on a piece of machinery, which is insane. I mean, and then we get the token. It's exciting for me even talking about it now, just like with everybody, because I haven't talked to everybody in a while. But like, that stuff's the exciting part. And I get it that there's a lot of pressures. I get it that some people go way deep. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are entrepreneurs that go 0 to 100 real quick and just start swinging the card and like buying and taking the drive up of like the market going up, and then they're just buying at bad times. And those are kind of what I say to those folks. It's a lesson learned, and just kind of back it down some, understand what the next cycle can be, find out something
Everybody's
that you can
going to
grow.
do that their first cycle. Everybody,
first cycle,
I did that on my first
like,
cycle. And I was like, oh, depressed.
Doing it.
Pause.
Son of Tech's buying some stuff. I saw BBT out here. I'm buying, bro. So we're sharing in that. We're showing our enthusiasm and building and trying to show people kind of the latest, right? I mean, that's kind of what we do from like content creation side is, what's this new thing do? And how does it work with this particular coin or this particular coin? So we're doing it from more of a observe and report, like of trying to, not trying to, I'm trying to like get people to understand the participation piece, because maybe they fractal into all kinds of different things, right? Which help build the ecosystem. It's not always just about mining. It's not for everybody. Maybe your power rate's just not there. You do it small, understand, scale, and then figure out where you can make a contribution. Maybe it is on layer 2. Maybe it is making NFTs. Maybe you're creative, but understand that ecosystem is there for you. And somewhere in that ecosystem will meet up with you. Like, it'll make sense for some folks, but
well, and to your point earlier, like I just finished listening to the audio book. It was the Almanac of Naval. And one of the things he says in there is like, I just completely ignore politics in any world events. I am focused on what I'm doing, and that is all. Like, I'm moving towards that goal. And if you set it up with something which he continues on, if you set it up to something that you're extremely passionate about, then you aren't going to have that distraction as well, or as much of a distraction. Like, you've been extremely busy. It's like all this stuff that's going on in the world. Well, that's fine, but that can be set to the side as I continue to push forward and work. And so I really like that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it's good to help people that need. If something was in our community, we would really help with that. You know, you can't boil the ocean, as I like to say. I understand that a lot of those kind of things. People ask me, "Oh, what about this?" And there's a lot of stuff going on around the world, and there's a lot of bad things. I'm like, I understand. It's unfortunate. I'm trying to move things forward to help build a positive world to where maybe there's opportunities for other people, be a jobs creator as a company, business owner. And try to do what I can, at least from my area, that I have at least some level of control. And that's where I put my energy at. It's not that I don't discount anything that's going on out there, or I get caught up in the, like, what's going on. It's like, man, there's a lot of things going on, my dude. Like, so, what I can control is what I try to maintain my focus on.
I literally have stoicism for inner peace, like sitting right here on my desk. But that's a good one if you want to get into that. But I always say that, like, the world's been ending. I've been being told the world is ending since the day I was born.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's just,
it's a machine, man.
Guess what? It is ending. I on a large enough time scale, the world is ending. I don't know when that is, right? Or you could go, is it, it's the end of the world as we know it. It is, right?
Yep. Or can you focus on things that you control and that you can better in your situation, and be positive because you're excited when you wake up, like, let's go, let's get this done. Like, that's just you're mentally healthier because you're focused. You got something to look forward to. There are stresses. Don't get me wrong, man. We have stresses. Like, we have things that we try to work through. Not everything works. You'll see some of that coming in the video where it's like, we're almost there, and then we find out like we have parts missing inside our container, and it's like, oh my God, where can we get this stuff at? Because they were imported containers, so there was we had to like craft things, and like, you just work through that adversity and try to figure out what's the least line without breaking the bank to get it done, and then kind of learn that lesson of like, okay, on the next one, we're definitely going to check for this. Keep your checklist, learn from those discoveries, and that way it hopefully saves you not. And then that's where we try to like share it. We're lucky we get to have an audience that will give us feedback and stuff, and we can help project some of that out there to say, hey man, I had some issues and here's what I did to fix it. Hopefully it saves you some time. I'll give them one that we were talking about right before we came on with, like, the power. We had just turned on this farm on the 19th, the 16th of this last month, and we had 2 containers of 4 online. And I'm going to have a whole video on this explaining how this works. But bottom line, I had 1 transformer on 2 containers. We were on for 18 days. On the 19th day, the morning of, we turned on another transformer and turned it back on. Can you hear me? Oh, you want me to keep going?
I'm going to pee real quick. You tell us to continue the story because I heard it. I'm just going to take a bio break while you tell it.
Yeah, go do your bio break, my dude. So anyways, we go to turn on these last 2 containers on the last day. Well, the way the agreement read, they said that, hey, there could be some charges based on, you turn it on mid-month. We turn on that last container, 12 hours, my dudes. We get our first bill. So for 18 days, we're at 2.3 megawatts of power use. For that much time at our rates, around $28,000 is what that should have costed. Bill comes in at $66,000. Comes in at $66,000 because there was no meter yet until both transformers are turned on. They take the peak rate and then blend it across the entire 18 days. And it's in the contract. There's nothing I can do, right? We just didn't fully understand what that meant, right? So essentially 2.3 megawatts for 18 days, 3.9 megawatts last day is when they took the snapshot, and all 18 days I have to pay. It's in the contract. So it's just what your peak rate value is until all their meters are in place. So the hard lesson learned, my dudes. Like, now that bill is $66,000. Relatively rate of based on 2.3 megawatts, we're like paying like 9-10 cents, for that power rate, which was kind of terrible, right? But hard lesson learned. it's going to be a good video when I show you guys kind of the breakdown of that to be aware of if you're in that same kind of predicament, right? So it's a tough lesson learned, you know, that we wish we could have, you know, just understood. Like, you can read the words, but until you see it in action, you see when it's going to get snapshotted, it's not fully understood of like, I'm going to be at 2 point. It's not written in a way that you understand that, hey, I'm at 2.3 for 18 days. And on the last day, when you're going to take the snapshot, I'm at, you know, 3.9. And yes, there's probably smart people in the chat are going to see this and like, oh my God, you don't know that? Yeah, man, I didn't know that, dude. Like, I'm glad that you do, but we didn't. And that's what happened. So it's like, this is for those kind of things. Like, the first question you go is, if I turn on in the middle of the day or the middle of the month, are you going to hit me at my peak load? And if so, I'm going to make sure I'm low until the next cycle starts, and then I'll turn everything on, right? Because I could have saved. If I would have just kept those last 2 containers off, it'd have been like 27 grand. So it's an unfortunate set of circumstances, but it's a hard lesson learned that we can now share with you guys, and to make sure that you don't do it. And I told our power company, I was going to call them out on it, but it is what it is. It's in the contract. It's not their fault. It's my fault. But it's, you know, that's the point of like these kind of videos and this kind of stuff, is to kind of give people background on that kind of stuff. And, you know, maybe it helps somebody sometimes.
Sometimes you have to learn the lesson yourself, but hopefully you can learn some things from other people and not make the same mistakes.
For sure. I mean, and that's why I never feel bad. I've always told people this: never feel bad with sharing a life experience, even if it's a negative one, right?
Right.
If anything, it's given people perspective of like what can happen. And then the biggest value that you can give is like, and maybe it's not right in that moment, you share it at that moment, but then if you come back to it and say, hey, you know, I shared this thing, here's how I kind of dealt with it, right? Because then that gives conclusion to that story, at least for that particular issue. And I found that very valuable for people, you know, like to like lean into things that have problems. I mean, we've had that kind of thing, and it helps, I think, everybody kind of understand that, hey, everybody has things and we work through it, and how we get out of those successful and keep good mental clarity with that. It's like, it's how you work it, man. And it's what it is. Crypto will beat you up and drag you down, and like, you think you got it, and then things happen, and then the market doesn't do exactly what you thought it was going to do, and you know, the opposite happens. And I saw a lot of people like, I had a sell in December, it was 16.9 and it went to 24, and everybody's like, damn it, man, you know, is it going to go back to 16? And what it is just like, you know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe March would be a dump. I hear a lot of pressure on March, but you know, maybe it goes up, right? So
yeah,
it's just like, keep grinding, you know, keep stacking sats, that kind of thing.
You have to do what you like. If you have a strong enough conviction and you are genuinely interested and excited by blockchain and Bitcoin in general, then it's not going to be as stressful. If you're in it, at least from my perspective, and this is something that I've had to like definitely like have conversations with myself on too. I'm preaching to the choir. If you're purely focused on price go up and try to make a killing off of it, then I just don't think that mentally you're going to be able to survive that, or emotionally, right? Because I've definitely tied my mood to the price of Bitcoin before. You know, I'm happy it's $70,000. Oh no, it's 16. I'm not so happy. But like, you shouldn't let that attach to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're human, and we're gonna feel like all the emotions that go with any kind of like down change like that, where it's like, oh man, did I what was the calculus seemed right, you know, like, so where's the calculation that's going wrong? What it comes down to is just like all the other things. It's not just about price, it's about engagement. One of my very first things when I see it all going down, I'm like, has anything fundamentally changed?
Right.
Has the arguments in the positive side, is there genuine issue with them? Have they effectively, has the code changed? Has some big thing? If no, then at the end of the day, it's the cycles, it's the market cycles. It's the emotional swing of people that have buttons that they can sell, right?
Yeah.
And then it kind of swings down, and then you'll start to see that kind of positive motion up. And then there's just tons of people that are attached to that messaging, that are sending shit on Twitter all the time, like, oh, you know, it jumps like $1,000, and there's like rocket ships and all kinds of stuff, and it's like people get really tied to that cycle. And what I'd say, it's fine to kind of witness some of that, but like have your own thing going on that's making you have that upward strike, to make you feel mentally better and stay in it. How, I'm looking at the title, How to Survive in a Down Market, right? And the basic key is have a purpose of what you're trying to achieve. Personally, and that has some interacting in the crypto thing. If you have lots of stacks of GPUs, maybe you're doing just a couple, take a pause. Now this is your time to learn more about the networks and what do they have to provide, right? How to spin up something maybe on Flux, how to do a Ravencoin asset and join their metaverse that's been built around that on Braveland as an example. Understand on how some of these other networks, what their other functions, like there's whole entire communities that are building stuff in these. ETC has some that maybe ETH your fancy, maybe Polygon, like start to kind of like take a pause now, because now you're not chasing the headlines of like price go up. Understand where things are going, and maybe you'll find some like, oh, nobody's seen this yet. I might get a couple of these coins, fill this ecosystem out, and next thing you know, that's how you get into the atoms and the things that pop real hard, because they're building stuff, and they're like, there's a small group of people that like, dude, we've known this thing's going to be fire, right? I mean, we're seeing this right now with like render tokens getting a lot of, OTE is getting a lot of focus right now because it's functionally working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And I've been talking about that since 2017. Remember when we thought ETH was going to go away in 2017, right? It's like, well, there's render, there's all of these new functions, multi-compute. Golem had stuff going there for a little bit, thinking that we were going to have like a global supercomputer, right? And it didn't really pan out, right? But like a lot of those kind of innovations is where that excitement comes from. And it took them 5 years to finally get a product that's working very well, right? And so now you have these positive things with render and stuff. So is there going to be future stacks of development and people getting in? The sea rises all boats. Bitcoin flies back up to 100K plus, or you're back past its all-time high. It's going to rise the stack, and so, because that's just the natural effect order of crypto. It has a lot of since the exchanges for most things are to Bitcoin, not to USD, as Bitcoin rises and less people are dumping those exchange rates, it lifts everything. People are like, oh, it doesn't always do it. I'm like, well, if there's not a lot of liquidity change on those exchanges or those decentralized exchanges, they're priced to a Satoshi level with Bitcoin, and it doesn't necessarily just peel away. Right. That's an order book thing. So if it's at 350 Satoshis and Bitcoin doubles in price, guess what? It goes up with it. Now it might start immediately selling because people start to see that Satoshi price and going, I'm out, and hit the button. But like the reality is that the sea does rise all boats because of the way it's wired up. Right. So
I think that changes eventually. Right. I mean, we've been saying that for a long time, but
well, there's a lot of bot architecture that takes advantage of that now, of like trying to arbitrage that. And they're tied to, the top 150 tokens. I mean, I've seen, if you don't have to look far to see for scripts that are written for you to take advantage of a lot of those like decentralized exchanges. And you're essentially just putting, Bitcoin and Ethereum into an account, and then it's going to diversify that out, and then has an out as that starts to go up, right? And you're that's what keeps a lot of those markets in check, is because of the automation of the arbitrage, right? So they'll try to do that, so a lot of that will start to go away, but it does lift because only so many people have so much money, and that when you start looking at some of these market caps, the reality is that they'll run out pretty quick and depleted, but you're going to get that down drop on some of the stuff. I see that with the Ravencoin. Ravencoin has enough of liquidity in it that while Bitcoin pumped to 24, Raven went up to 3 cents. But when you do it, it should have went to like 3.8 to 4, but it didn't. There was selling happening as it started to lift up with it, right? Because there was enough liquidity in there to start to absorb some of it. So there's some interesting market dynamics on it, but dude, I can talk forever. So just pause me if you want to move on.
We're just gonna keep going. I think everybody's soaking in all the knowledge as we can, me included. That being said, though, let's let's talk about this. The big crypto and Bitcoin miners, the way they're rebranding, the kind of the two positions here, just to kind of set it up for you all, is there's an idea that the miners should focus on mining and not diversify. However, there's this whole other side of the token that says diversify, rebrand, move into high-powered computing, that sort of thing. This article is coming from CoinDesk as well. It says some of the new business lines are more profitable than Bitcoin mining, but not all. Bitcoin miners are trying to survive an icy crypto winter by broadening the scope of their business, both in name and in practice. On January 4th, one of the biggest publicly traded Bitcoin mining firms announced it was swapping the blockchain out for its name for platforms. The rebranding to Riot Platforms was to underpin an increasingly diversified business. It is not the only firm making a name change. In the past year, miners have worked to diversify their revenue streams into other products and services using energy-intensive data centers. Some did so in response to brutal market conditions, while others took steps to prepare for a downturn when business was still going strong. The strategy is the opposite of what we've seen in the past bull markets, where publicly traded firms would add the word crypto or blockchain to their names and see their shares surge more than 100% in a day, even if the company had no viable crypto-related business plan. And I remember that happening for sure. Now, quote, there's a general desire by companies to distance themselves from the crypto bubble of the last couple of years, end quote, said D.A. Davidson analyst Chris Brendler. Quote, it makes it easier when you're dealing with more traditional finance institutions, end quote. Exactly how much of this wave of corporate rebranding and promises of new business lines is just talk to pump stock valuations in a depressed market, and whether it will last is yet to be determined. It depends on how profitable it will be to diversify. As we see with the last bear market, many miners are pivoting their public narratives as a diversified business so they don't face solely the struggling mining valuation, said Ethan Vera, Chief Operating Officer of mining service firm Luxor Technologies. Just like traditional commodities, Bitcoin mining is an extremely competitive and capital-intensive business, with miners competing for an asset that is limited in quantity. There are only about 2 million more Bitcoins that can be mined until the Bitcoin network reaches a cap of 21 million. Assuming the current Bitcoin price of $25,000 per token, the total value of Bitcoin to be mined works out to about $50 billion. That amount is super finite, said Lucas Pipes, an analyst at investment bank B. Riley Financial. With many miners adding constant computing power to mine the limited amount of Bitcoin, basing a whole business model on mining alone may not be viable. So companies are looking to repurpose some of their computing power for other industries and services. This includes selling high-performance computing to firms in industries like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Others are looking to capitalize on energy markets, either by owning their own assets or selling energy back to the grid. Quote, if you want to have a market cap of 50 billion, and what good CEO doesn't want to have a high market cap, you need to do something else as well, Pipe said. However, many strategies miners are implementing to diversify could do more harm than good. High-performance computing services take away from their core business, according to D.A. Davidson's Brendler. Brendler thinks miners are probably better off just focusing on mining Bitcoin instead of entering a new sector and taking on clients that need high-powered computing and compete against established tech firms such as Amazon and Microsoft. And what about miners trying to sell energy to the grid? That's just another sign of the difficult times, he said. One of the ways miners are diversifying their revenues is by leveraging their high energy consumption and close ties to the power grids. This is just what you've been talking about earlier, right? So I think we can kind of move that. That's one strategy. I think the second play that we need to kind of define here, because I think we've defined that one quite well already in today's episode, is the high performance computing play. Miners entering the high-performance computing market are essentially hitching the wagon on a mega trend that should last for many years, B. Riley's Pipe said. Bitcoin miners are uniquely positioned to compete in high-performance computing, as most of them already have data centers and access to low-cost power, said Luxor's Vera. Now, a side note here, I think like if you have a bunch of Bitcoin miners, though, it's not... You have to change the actual hardware that you're running to make this play. Now, they're going to use an example here, and that isn't Bitcoin mining, right? However, the high performance computing market is very competitive, and miners lack the infrastructure and capabilities of already established data center operators. The computing industry is a business geared to face customers, Vera said, and many Bitcoin miners don't exactly have sales divisions. In early 2022, Canadian mining company Hut 8 Mining bought 5 data centers from TerraGo for about $22 million, which had grown to 14% of its revenue by the end of the third quarter. That's more than its mining hosting business was bringing in quarterly last year. Diversifying into the wider world of compute is essentially catching a rising tide, B. Riley's Pipe said. The industry may ebb and flow, and it might be riskier depending on the clientele, but overall it's a growing sector. ZIL estimates that gross margin for Hut 8's high-performance computing segment has remained about 50% through 2022, while its mining margin dropped to 34% in Q3. For comparison, operating margins for major computing firms such as Amazon Web Services and Microsoft are reportedly in the 25 to 40% range. I think that's really all we need to cover. I do want to clarify, first of all, Hut 8 was heavily leveraged into GPU mining. Not only that, they had custom GPUs from NVIDIA directly, which puts them in a very unique position when it comes to high-powered computing. The home miner with a GPU rig is not necessarily in the position to adopt this type of strategy. This is a strategy that is adopted by essentially high-powered computing servers that are going to be able to run these GPUs in a by 8 configuration, which means that you have to have essentially more PCI lanes, which means more CPUs, which means more memory. All these types of things go into the cost of this. And this is also something actually that we'll probably be talking about a lot more in the GPU mining space with things like proof of useful work from Flux, right? So it's a really interesting topic, but I think that unfortunately the way this article was written, they're saying Bitcoin miner Hut 8, but if you understand the industry, you understand that very important distinction, right?
Yeah. So yeah, to jump on that, none of the Bitcoin miners out there that are just Bitcoin, those are ASICs. And those ASICs are made to do one thing, to process SHA-256 transactions as fast as not thermodynamically possible on 5 nanometer, 7 nanometer architecture. So you're not repurposing that to do anything besides Bitcoin mine. And most of the facilities are structured in a way that they're designed for that, if it's what's miner or any of the other form factors to fit on a shelf. So, and they're not in a necessarily what I would call a clean environment either. Even some of the nicer locations like that have relatively good filtration and airflow, they're still super dusty. So they're not really quality data centers. And anybody that has any experience in the data center world, it isn't necessarily about how powerful everything is. It's your security, because you're dealing with things that have to do with PII information, CUI information, which is very important. Who has access to those servers? They're usually locked up. There's Halon because you have financial and critical services running on them. So there's a decorum and a design that has to be met from a data center activity. So at best, most of those things with like Hut 8 typically would be something like just a render farm. So it's stuff that if you lose it, it doesn't matter. You just re-render, right? So it's just a job load that it's taking, and then it's outputting something. So to refactor a crypto mine to a data center, not even getting just for those reasons is typically not what you would do. So it's kind of being semi mischaracterized on an HPC
You're going to have
standpoint.
way too much power than what you actually need as well, right?
Yeah, and GPUs don't use near Hut 8 when they were redesigning with the custom NVIDIA GPUs, and they did have like a server set up, with dual Xeons and lots of memory and a fiber channel back end with a full fiber optic connection. But when you start talking data centers, especially HPC data centers, something like Oak Ridge, something like, like one of those that are very purpose built. Those are, as fast as that compute is, and that by 8, PCIe 8.0 across, 8x across all lanes, quad, Xenon, Platinum, or, the top end AMD processors. Those things are made like with the fiber channels that are, put into the back of them are, 10 gig to 100 gig plus, right? Because everything needs to talk at a rate of speed from an input output standpoint. So this is part of the reason why render and all that kind of stuff took very small jobs, single SIT files. If you're trying to do 3D modeling at a singular level, it's not going to go render a Disney movie, right? So there's a lot going on there. So, you could have some of the GPU farms that were kind of set up like this. I'll use Merkle, for example, that it had a pretty recent, deployment, large facility. Was one we visited, half a year ago. That was something that they could set up to do some limited compute. It was designed with, the basic servers that were put in there were enough to where you could do some like clustering, on the compute side. However, again, it's not at like a data center. It won't compete with like an Amazon type of price point. You're going to have to go cheaper. And some of those data centers like Amazon and all that other stuff, they're going to have, fire suppression. They're going to have all these other things that we would normally have in a crypto farm. The cooling is going to be, it's going to be a cooled environment where these are going to be kind of in the warm environments, or in, HUD 8 has them literally in containers, right? So, from a security standpoint. So I don't know. I see it as kind of like maybe a split hedge of what it is. Stuff that maybe mining pools are doing, or if you're a large enough miner where the ordinals thing is very interesting. We were talking about that earlier. Because now if you're large enough Bitcoin miner, you could leverage that kind of off-chain posting of a block to where now it's not necessarily doing the on-chain competing for fees. You have a whole other side business now that is just capturing maybe somebody that really wants to get that picture in the next block type of thing. So you could generate a lot more revenue for the pool operators. One of the questions that we're going to be hopefully talking to Luxor here soon. I was trying to get something. We were actually trying to talk to him this today. One of the questions I have is like, okay, you guys are doing a lot of this stuff, but how are you guys keeping track of off-chain transactions? And how does the miner that's mining, that's creating the weight on your network for giving you enough hash rate, how are they able to validate, what's being included now, that bonus of a block? Like you should see a bump in a yield, but now how do you work to make that transparent? I think that's the kind of next phase. I get it why it comes off a line in the beginning, because you're trying to get a person that's trying to work a deal. But how do you snap that line to see that it's that, if they paid you $30,000 in fees and you're given $18,000 in fees, which is significantly more than what normal blocks are, like what's the delta there? What's your margin? Can you make that exposure to margin? You have a plan to make that exposure to margin, because then that's going to get into a whole other rabbit hole and all these different, Foundry starts doing it. If everybody else starts doing it, because they see that, hey, it's a viable business model. Then now we're not going to see, the transparency that Bitcoin's doing. And I see that's why some of the maxis get really fired up about it, of like, this is bad. This is a bad move. The incentives are not right. And I think the market ultimately dictates if people get the wind, this is the interesting thing about this community, about mining in general. If the miners feel that they're getting robbed, or that, wait a minute, like, am I getting all what you're doing? I get that you're going to take a margin, but if you're making more money, like, I'm just going to point my stuff to another chain, or another pool, right? And very quickly, I don't want to say it's like cancel kind of thing, but like very quickly people could move off of the pool, right? So it's a balance that each of these pools are going to be beholden to make sure that they're not gaming the system for their own immediate gain, because miners are actually giving them the weight that pool. So I think it's naturally going to go into a good behavior, and there's a natural order to make sure that it's exposed. I think it's just one of those. Phase one is, does this work? Phase two is, okay, how can we make this transparent? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
because the first person that does that too now sets the standard, because then everybody's going to be like, well, at least they're showing me what the hell's going on here. You know, and everybody should make money. And if you're a business and you're operating a function, you have to create revenue. That's the way you stay in business, right? So like I always tell people, never to apologize for taking a profit, for trying to better your business, expand your business.
Right.
If you're doing things like with a framework that allows you to do that, but like, you got, given the structure of the way Bitcoin mining works and the way mining in general works, if you start gaming that system for your own personal gain, you're probably going to get wrecked in the end, because people are going to decide that, hey, that's not what we like.
Was it F2 pool that like had all those issues with their internal exchange, and it went from like top 3 to I think it's like number 4 now? Like, people say like these exchanges won't go, or not exchanges, but sometimes say like these pools are too powerful and they're not going to go anywhere. But I mean, in reality, like they do.
Overnight, it's a config change. Like we leverage Awesome Miner right now to manage our 1200 ASICs on there, and we have a good relationship with them for that. You know, we pay their fee and all that. You know, everybody's got to make money to, you know, provide services and stuff, but our ability to change a pool takes about 35 seconds across the entire 1200 ASICs. It's that quick. We literally have it scripted.
Yeah.
I can put in pool number, the next pool, apply to all ASICs, and right down the list it goes.
Yep.
And it's done. So that, you know, I think is,
well,
it's all about service, you know, like if they're, it's very powerful. And you know, that's where I think it kind of, if people are providing good services and they're enhancing your ability to generate a little more, I get that. I mean, and I think that's Ordinals is an interesting development in Bitcoin. It's probably one of the most interesting developments in Bitcoin in a long time. And it shows the ingenuity of people coming and thinking of like how else to use something. Like something may have a certain intent. Taproot for sure had an intent, but it also now gave this whole new thing, right, that manifested from it. And I like development. I like seeing things move forward, right? So I'm interested in what could be. I do understand the arguments on the risk of the chain getting really bloated. I do understand the risk of all these other information things that could get in there that then people are like, oh, you can't erase it. And what if you have all this bad information in there? Or, you know, like illegal information, like with, you know, if you're talking like some kind of like child porn or something terrible that shouldn't be there, like how do you handle those kind of situations? And, you know, I always look at it like, you know, the regulatory fronts and all that, you got to understand how that stuff works and understand that there is some gatekeeping that's just kind of like ethical, like of like you got to mint the block. Like the pool ultimately is creating that post, right? So it's like a natural filter kind of thing. It's like, well, I'm not trying to censor stuff, but come on, man, like that's not. I think the world can agree that's pretty trash, and so there's a decorum. I think that people naturally will fall into that, but like. You know, those kind of things is I think the way you answer that kind of stuff. But like, you know, it all comes back down. If a pool lets that through and you have somebody out there, or maybe somebody wins a block with enough hash rate, or they've rented it from Nice Hash or something, and they want a block and they want to be an idiot and put something in there. I think you kind of flag those as like, you know, well, somebody did it, you know, like you can not have it on the Explorer view or whatever else, but like, you know, the society needs to come around on those kind of things. But let the innovation happen, man. Like that's how we progress forward.
The porn industry is very innovative. They're doing some crazy things with 8K these days and VR.
They're always usually the leader on it.
They're always ahead of the game.
They're always ahead of the game.
Bitcoin 2024 halving will be its most important. This is coming from an interview with Charles Edwards. We're not going to go into the interview. We're going to talk about the premise. The Bitcoin commentator and fund manager reveals why 2023 is the start of the new regime for BTC price action and institutional involvement. Bitcoin stands at the start of a new regime after its early 2023 price gains, and next year will prove pivotal. That is the opinion of Charles Edwards, founder of quantitative Bitcoin and digital asset fund Caprioli Investments. As investment behavior around Bitcoin recovers and align with network fundamentals and price action, Edwards, perhaps like many other institutional professionals, is gearing up for an explosive period of growth. The jury may still be out on whether the bottom is in for Bitcoin's price, but long-term investors, the time to allocate is just the beginning, he argues, or for long-term investors. In an extensive interview with Cointelegraph, Edwards reflects on the prospects for Bitcoin and the crypto industry in the coming years and whether the 2023 rebound has legs. Looking ahead, next year's block subsidy halving will be especially important as Bitcoin becomes, in his words, the hardest asset in the world with certainty. Now, you guys can go read the entire interview here, but they're kind of, it's a little misleading as far as kind of marking 2023's rebound as the effectual thing here. As if you read the interview, it really does talk more about the 2024 halving and how much of an impact that will have. As we've seen for the past 12 years, the halving of Bitcoin does in fact impact the price. It typically has every single time caused the price of Bitcoin and bringing, high tide brings up all ships, like Bits was just saying, brings up the rest of the crypto market. Usually takes about 6 months for it to start to really take off. And then for about a year after that, you hit the peak. Usually what I've been looking at, it's a year and a half is where you hit the top of Bitcoin after every halving. But what is undeniable is that the halving has an impact on the price of Bitcoin. And it goes up from wherever its starting point was, right? And I think the big question really here is how much more adoption does that drive for Bitcoin in this next run, right? Because we're kind of getting to the point to where mainstream's fully aware of this, and a lot of the mainstream had their first cycle come to Jesus meeting this past cycle, right? So what happens when they see, oh, this pattern is a thing and it's happening again? How euphoric does it go at that point?
Yeah, I mean, halvings are always interesting events. The amazing thing about halvings is that it's super mechanical. One day it's you're getting 6.25, and after the halving you're getting 3.125. So there is an absolute mechanical thing that happens with yield. So as a miner, you're essentially getting half that next day, right? If your luck and everything still pans out, right? So it's typically what's happened over time is sometimes it starts to front run looking like it's going to be priced in, and then it usually does a dump as people try to, shake the market a little bit. I look at it right now. If Bitcoin, like as a miner, and you look at $24,000 Bitcoin price, and we know what the difficulty is right now and what our yield is. If Bitcoin at the time of the halvings at 50K, or doubles from where it's at price wise, and let's say difficulty goes up another 15-20%, we might make 15-20% less yield right now. When the halving happens, we're essentially back where we're at right now. Like if price doubles from where it's at, we're essentially making the same amount by USD, but a lot less yield, right? So why the USD calculation matters, obviously, is you're paying your expenses. You're trying to figure out, does your operation take an impact? What's it have to be? So from a miner standpoint, you're kind of looking at what's it have to be for me to maintain operations, to understand on how we're going to handle it, and prepare to be able to go a few months maybe in the negative or in the red, or look at whatever agreement you have and park it. Like for our particular situation, we have to maintain 1.5 megawatts out of 5. So our, lever is what's 1.5 megawatts need to make, like in the worst case. So you got to build those out and your risk, especially if you have like a business, your business is around it.
Right.
If you're personally, you're kind of looking at like what could this really happen with like price and the way it usually goes up after those. And, I think it all comes back down to, I like looking at what are the services, what's growing in this space, who's going to on-ramp new services. Is Fidelity Capital finally going to release the fact when I can log into my Fidelity account and I can go from stock straight to Bitcoin in Fidelity? Because you have a lot of capital. I think that's one of the biggest, largest events, at least in the US, that are going to occur, is the moment that people can take already vested capital. So it's capital that's not coming directly out of your pocket right now in your earned income, but it is investment capital that you can easily swap without moving out of that exchange, out of Fidelity or whatever 401k that you're using. And you can go, I want to do a 5% allocation in crypto, a market basket, whatever. Because now you're taking something that's already there and you're just changing the mix, right?
Right.
So it's a lot easier for people. And once that word gets out and people start to see that lift, they're like, wait a minute here. Once they start showing that crypto indices versus your market indices, I think things will happen. So it's what I'm trying to say with that is the functionality of new services come on, unbeknownst to everybody else, end up causing that lift. Has nothing necessarily to do with the halving. It might be tied to the halving, but the scarcity of the halving create the demand curve on as more people kind of get in there, because now there's less on the market that's being sold, and it's just a mechanical thing that happens from a scarcity side. But I think the feature side of being able to have more options in areas that don't require people to just put more money in directly, but transfer money that is in an institution of some sort to those markets, the feature of that, having that function, that functionality, I think is going to be the largest driver that happens to coincide around the same time as the halving. When we were out there at CES this year, talking to Fidelity Capital that's there, they had a whole booth, and it's like, they're working hard regulatory wise, right, to try to get that to where you can go into your existing 401k. And if you are a person that wants to diversify 5% in, you can. And like, it is still custodial, not your keys, not your coins. I understand. But maybe that is the trigger that then gets people more interested in to try to acquire, not in that way, but through, can I mine it? Can I buy it from another exchange and move it into my own wallet? That kind of thing. So I think those type of events are going to occur within this cycle before the halving, and we'll have that run up probably just before it, and then it's just going to like, oh, the halving happened and now Bitcoin went up. It's like, well, in the features came online too, right?
In the agricultural revolution, everybody didn't stop hunting and gathering, right? Like, sure, that eventually phased out more and more hunters and something became more dominant. But like, I look at it the same way, like, not your keys, not your crypto, kind of like, not everybody's going to understand that. And as it gets more adopted and the incentive is there for people to self-custody, then they'll move into that realm. Right. And so it's kind of like, we're in this weird kind of transitional phase, and it's going to be like that for a while. I think it's going to be like that for quite a long time. I don't think it's going to just change overnight. There are some things that can make it change overnight, like a collapse of the US dollar, sure. But, whether or not that happens is out of my control, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, so those are a lot bigger issues. I mean, let's put it this way. There's a lot of, the U.S. government has a lot of incentive to not have that happen. And there might get to a point to where there's not much they can do about it. That's a different issue. But like, I think that there's different triggers that are trying to be used, and it all takes into consideration of the existing economy structure the way it is now, and doesn't take in the fact of certain elements that I think over time are running in parallel paths. I look at like a Gantt chart, right? And there's certain things that we're all looking at. It's kind of the critical path, like market's going to crap, dollar could go away, all this stuff. But there's other paths that are happening in parallel. Innovation and artificial intelligence. We still have we see what GPT is doing, but like what what other major leap advancements that now change the way things are that maybe drop cost considerably and just change the whole dynamic. Like it's like overnight. I'm not saying overnight, but things could change to a way where it's like a couple companies get major advancements to where, well, now our eggs cost like 10 cents because like we can have this fully automated and it happens really quick, right? So there's things that happen that start to change dynamics that were kind of left field and we didn't even realize. And then there's other aspects of discovery, innovation that we didn't even know occurred. I mean, just I read an article, not too long ago about palladium, which is a much more powerful material to make batteries with.
Okay.
And if you just look it up, it's like there's a lot of research on it, but they're just at that kind of forefront where it's not flammable. It stores battery, juice a lot more longer. It is an easier process. Like there's like where was this all our life, right? So it's like things that overnight could start to change the dynamic of things, and now there's like a industrial revolution of technology stack that now kind of offsets. Like we have a lot of debt, but now we can burn it down in a different way. I look at the positive, like there's a momentum to try to figure out a better way. I think Bitcoin's a better way for money. I think crypto in general is, from the people and the participants is a better way. That's going to be foundational to structure and like money. There's other innovations that I think are going to help buy down debt differently. And then as long as we don't push, Pookie or anybody to start nuking us, right? I think we're in a glide path that there's innovators out there that are just like, no, I don't accept this year of reality. I want to make a better reality.
Right.
And I kind of align myself more to those folks of like, yeah, man, I hear the media and all that. Like, dude, I ain't got time for that. I'm moving forward and we're gonna make a better thing.
Yeah.
And I think that always wins over time. And
you're either, if you're too focused on the negative, you're never gonna find the positive. That's pretty much how it goes down as far as that's concerned. So I definitely agree with you, and I think we move. You either go all in on a positive direction, or what the rest of the world says no, and you just whatever, you're still at the same point. It's not like anything changed, right? Either things get better or they just stay where they were as they were expected. I don't think that there's much to worry about there. I did want to bring up the halving of other coins, other cryptos, the altcoins, the shit coins, and how they don't really have impact on their price. And I do think that if you're looking at a halving cycle, you focus on the Bitcoin halving cycle, and I wouldn't expect anything from any other halvings at this time. Personally, I don't think that it's wise as a market indicator to look at anything but Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to what the market demand is and like what the liquidity pool underneath that is. And a lot of the other halvings that are happening, even Litecoin, I would say arguably is probably one of the easiest to snap a line to on. Did it really have much of an effect? It hasn't. When you look at like the issuance adjustments that happened with Dogecoin from yesterday.
Effect on price. To be clear, the network the difficulties went down, right? So Flux had a halving, price didn't go up. Price was kind of already priced in, I think, before the halving happened. So, I mean, it didn't go up enough, and all you really saw was a decrease of hash rate on the network, right? And that's how it's compensating, right? The only thing that seems to have an effect on actual price go up is the Bitcoin halving.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just the demand curve on Bitcoin is significantly higher, and it's priced in with big market participants that can move price, right? So, and some of that's just market movers, makers, however you want to put it, that can push that narrative. But there's also just a natural demand curve on Bitcoin because it's part of a lot of institutional state funds, government funds, on other countries. And it gets a lot more exposure to help to drive that demand. And just like, hey, there's going to be less on the market available. So what we're buying is what's kind of out there, or how many miners are selling in that, right? and shaking them out. But yeah, I agree. There's not, I mean, we've seen it with Ravencoin also. Ravencoin's price went down just like everything else, even with the halving. And the reciprocation was the network hash rate, I think was at what, 3 terahash or, 3 terahash at the time and went down to, or 12 terahash and went all the way down to 3, right? So like it rescinded, 4x on hash rate.
Yeah, it's down
when that
to,
happened.
it's at 10 right now.
Yeah, so it's worked its way back up.
Yeah.
But it's just super thinner margins, right, for everybody that's mining it at 10 terahash, right? So
let's talk about GPU mining a little bit. Let me go over the GPU mining miner releases real quick, because I do that every week for everybody in case we can catch anything neat. There's 3 new Bitcoin mining, 3 new GPU mining releases or miner releases on GitHub. BZ Miner version 13.2.1 is out. It's a plethora of basically fixes. There doesn't appear to be anything at this point that is significant. I mean, obviously you have the Nexa that they've been working on for quite some time to get kind of dialed in. So there's fixing for Nexa on 8 gigabyte cards and some rejections on Nexa pools and fixing reconnects. Other than that, we also had Team Black Miner version 1.92, which released today. They added vert hash intensity parameter and kapow intensity parameter, so you can set that for the dual mining modes. They also improved GPU switching code. They removed and reduced job not found rejects on some pools, fixed some API issues, and improved performance on vert hash by 5% with NVIDIA GPUs. So if you want to check that out for a performance boost on vert hash, not a bad idea. Check it out. And then finally, LOL Miner version 1.68 came out 2 days ago. Significantly improved Nexa mining performance on supported GPUs. So they say, for example, 25% increase on 8 gigabyte ampere GPUs. Now, remember, this is being developed with BZ Miner. So BZ Miner and LOL Miner are now working together. So pretty much you're going to get the same performance across either one. This ampere fix on the 8 gigabyte ampere GPUs is probably exactly what BZ Miner is referring to here as well. They even note Nexa development is continued joint effort with LOL Miner, essentially. So keep that in mind. They have some other fixes as well, and then some notes on some alternative Windows versions, which you can go check out there. It says that it's for determining available memory on Windows system. This was a thing that was with ETH2, I believe, back in the day. We need to do some testing, but I think that you might need to increase your virtual memory to get the most performance out of your GPUs on Nexa in particular. That's how I'm kind of reading the possibility here. But it says on most 8 gigabyte GPUs, this will cause the miner to select a smaller data set table that has only slightly above 2 gig. Therefore, the alternative version might be a good choice for systems with connected screens. And that probably, I bet we could maybe see that fixed with virtual memory. I'll get some testing going on, see what's going on there, but that's an interesting one. And it did say, general note, the Nexa GPU codes are and will be in the foreseeable future joint work with LEDOC from BZ Miner. So just so you guys know, like we said, that partnership's going on there. So those are the miner releases. GPU mining profitability, though, let's kind of take a look at what's going on. DNX has been kind of the hot topic lately. I'm getting very spotty results personally. I am not getting what the calculators say. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to test it fully. That being said, Nexa, as far as its profitability, seems to be right on point with hashrate.no. So, if you're looking at those for your profitability, that's on point. And the kaspa has been on point too. For the 6000 series AMD GPUs at 13 cents a kilowatt hour, you are in the green now. So this is the first time I think we've seen the AMD GPUs actually get into the green at this hash rate cost. So I think, and I want to get your opinion on this, Bits. I'm thinking if I look at previous cycles and the way they roll and how similar this one is looking to the previous cycle, I kind of am starting to think we're about 2 months out from seeing a recovery in the GPU mining side, meaning we're going to have, it's not going to be a lot of profit, but people that held on to their GPUs are going to be able to turn them back on and make a little bit, right? I think, and I'm thinking about 2 months for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think obviously if prices start to go up with Bitcoin and it starts bringing up some, some of the prices, the rest of the tokens, as people start to kind of go, well, are we going to get back into a bear market or a bull market? And which coins you're going to have your speculators going in there and driving prices up, which then allow some margin for, depending on what your kilowatt rate is for being able to participate, people start to turn on. And that mixed with some of the different features that the coins are coming out. I haven't heard of any kind of dark horses coming out or anybody trying to spend some new crypto or a new take on any other coins or anything like that. They're trying to jump on early or anything like that. But you're really the feature set and the demand. When it starts to outweigh what the exchanges are being able to KYC or any of that, that's when you start to see a lot of potential kind of demand curve on those coins. So, I think features are critical. I know that Flux is doing some stuff. The market moving with Bitcoin and its halving cycle, I think is going to be a big leading indicator if we're going to start to see some more. I mean, I think the impact that Ethereum moving over to proof of work had on the community was pretty strong, obviously. It's funny looking at some of those accounts out there that were very, beating on the drum, like trying to generate interest, because a lot of the interest, and if you just look at the hits and they're like, oh, it's a bear market. It's like, no, man, you lost an entire massive community.
Yeah.
When you flipped it, and all the people that are cloud
have you
hosting
seen their ETH core dev live streams, like 12 viewers? I'm like sitting there like,
terrible.
Oh man, nobody cares about this shit anymore right now.
No, they really impacted their engagement because of how
well, the incentive structure is messed up. If you're a miner, you're kind of incentivized to like play with the coin and the ecosystem, mint NFTs, do all that sort of thing. But if like your incentive structure is lock up all your ETH, then you're what's the incentive to like utilize you're not getting like massive rewards that allow you to do anything significant on the network, right?
Correct.
Network utilization just goes through the floor, which is exactly what's been happening. Right.
Yeah, but I mean, the only coins that are moving around right now are the extra fees that are coming out on the layer 1 side, still on the proof of stake side. So now you're having even the natural inflation still being locked up because they haven't. I mean, we're in February.
Shanghai is supposed to happen next month? And unlock staking, that's going to be fun, dude. I can't wait.
Yeah,
I'm going to do a live stream to watch that happen. Yeah, if they really unlock staking, I just want to watch like how much outflows happen as soon as that clicks, that switch. It's like, it's literally going to be just like turning on a faucet wide open. Shit, man. It's probably going to be like breaking a fire hydrant open. It's just
like what happens to all the folks that were locked up for so long.
Some have been locked up for like how long? Like 4 years?
Well, so they did it it was 2020, right? It was December of 2020. We went into 21, right? So December, I think I remember seeing the first few posts from Vitalik in November of 2020, saying, hey, it's live. And then I remember right there in the beginning of December, and this is before the real big run up, right?
The beacon chain launched.
Yeah, the beacon chain starting to get, participation and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. So there's a little calculus involved in that of like what could happen is you'd have some of the people hitting the exit door. But there also could be a lot of people sitting on the sidelines. This is part of the counter argument. I like saying both sides of the argument, right?
Yeah.
That have been just waiting for that moment to then finally lock up, because they're just like, you know what, I need to be able to come in and out of that door.
Right.
And if I don't have that option to come on,
but the people
I'm going to lock up my 32 ETH.
Aren't the people that are like that? Aren't they the ones that are just taking the tokenized staked ETH, like Lido and stuff?
They could if they go to Lido, but not everybody has that, right? So if you're staking with Lido, you can get the ST ETH. But then for a little bit there, you were trading under, so you were actually losing because it was really a futures price at the end of the day of what would that token be worth redeemable at that moment in time, and is it going to be lower? What ended up happening was, I mean, think about that, right? So if you were locked up and you locked up at $3,500 whatever price, and it went to 4,300, and you're like, hell yeah, I'm like going out. But then, you know, you didn't have it in ST, you maybe did it on Coinbase, right? So you were just locked up in kind of SOL, and then you rode that thing all the way down to 1,200, and you were forced to, right? So you're like, well, I can't unstake, right? Because I didn't lock it into a derivative side, you know, with like Lido or something. So, you know, that was one of the kind of unfortunate set of circumstances that the people that maybe needed the money at that moment in time and couldn't, you know, divest it because it's been locked up for now a little over 2 years. That kind of sucks, right? So if they actually do open it up, you know, that might bring a whole other list of people to it. Who knows? I don't really track so much with ETH now. That's
yeah,
moved to that.
I've only been tracking the Shanghai updates, and like if I catch a core dev live stream, I will. It's extremely depressing in those live streams. So like I said, last one I was in, there was 12 people watching, nobody chatting. And they're talking about Shanghai, the Shanghai upgrade, which is like should be the biggest thing to come to ETH ever, really. I mean, like, sure, I guess the move to proof of stake was the biggest, but this is a pretty big follow up. I mean,
yep.
As far as GPU mining, though, I think. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of depression in the market, but the GPU prices haven't really come down that much, which is interesting. The flood of GPUs that hit the market in the previous cycle are not hitting the market like they did last time either. A lot of more people are holding on to their graphics cards than in previous cycles, which is kind of interesting. That tells me that there are large GPU miners out there that are holding them in anticipation for some sort of change within it, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I think, I mean, it's like, we have all of ours. I haven't sold any. Most of them are turned off right now. We do have some that still support both Raven and Flux right now. But there's just, I have no motivation to try to sell them. I don't want to, because of that, just learned on that cycle, that it makes no sense to sell at the bottom if you need capital, you need capital. Like, right. Don't let anybody ever tell you not to, because you can always get back in, get your situation better, and then buy back in another time. Right. But like, yeah, there hasn't been any just crazy drop in prices. I was like kind of looking for some A2000, saying, hey, are these things going to hit $150? Like, is there an opportunity to get some, and everything's still, 280, 310, it's still pretty high, for A2000.
Go to do a 3070. You're like, that's way more. I was thinking like 3070s might hit like $200 a pop, and they're not. They're just not.
Yeah, they're not. There's just a high demand. A lot of people build a lot of gamer machines. There's still a lot of like local trading meetup
plus
sites
the price
and stuff
manipulation that AMD and NVIDIA have been caught doing. So
yeah. Well, and then and I think a lot of it also is like, the demand on like the super high end stuff. It's so like not worth any of they're not optimized at all for any of the, these the tokens, right? The 4090s.
Speaking
and that kind
of
stuff.
this though too, I don't know what kind of telegrams you're in, but Kaboom Racks just put up that they're buying used 3000 series across the board.
Yep.
They're like, hey, we'll buy anything. They're just buying them all up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of these places are capitalized to get ready for the next cycle, and looking at like it's a calculus. Nobody knows, right? What it comes down to is you're doing your calculus based on a few factors, like Bitcoin having coming up, market potentially recovering, some of these tokens getting 200-300% increase, which allows more mining, which will drive up based on a flat. If this current price of GPUs are what they are, you might see, a 30 to 40% increase in GPU prices. If we see a bump up, that's what they're hedging on, right? It's like, can I deploy capital here or somewhere else? And that's where they're deploying.
I was reading the 10x rule. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of reading. I have a lot of alone time right now. But I was reading the 10x rule, and one thing he said is it's gambling, but it's calculated gambling.
Yeah.
And you have to take those numbers and just crank them up if that's what you want to do. And and it's kind of interesting, right? And he's like, and you have to think, you have to go again. What I thought was really interesting they pointed out is he said that you have to go against what the public says. 9 times out of 10 you'll be wrong, but one time out of 10 that you're correct is the one that matters, right? Which I thought was interesting. Well, that's not viable for everyone, right? And that's that's just
wisdom
like
of the crowd. Yeah, wisdom of the crowd sometimes can get you pretty hard, right? But I think you just look, the easiest way is the way I've always done it is looking at like what's the progress on the token? Is there movement with like the development? What's the features? And does it make sense? Are they trying something different? Is it, what there are like other dynamics, like I saw somebody saying about Conflux having a really big pump. That was a 50 million plus coin pre-mine. Not really feeling it, right? So like there's certain activities that could be market makers really moving things around and messing with prices, especially if it's not on real big liquidity exchanges. Like if you're seeing something pump hard on Yobit, it's fake, my dude. So like certain things that are moving it, where's the liquidity making it go up, right? Look at the exchanges where that's pumping hard. And part of that too isn't even for any of us, right? What it is it's bots that are taking advantage of arbitrage bots that are thinking that they're following it up, and it's the automation. So it's literally bots fighting that may drive one of those tokens up, and one goes a little haywire and starts dumping a lot of money in it, and then a lot of them will automatically follow it up. And the whole time it's like, man, who's doing this? It's like, guess what, bro? Nobody. A couple dudes that had some bots that were running with some, 20 Bitcoin in an account, and they just threw a ton of money at it, and maybe it was a break or maybe it was something messed up. But like, you got to be careful on that, because it kind of like, what's the story? Does somebody know something, and it's like, no, especially on pre-mine stuff, you got to be real careful with that.
But if you can mine it and get it liquidated, then go for it, right? Like that's the
yeah, I mean, that's a calculated thing, right? If you got the the setup and your power's right, and you're just like, I'm gonna chase this one for a second, and as it's coming, it's going, like that quick, and you're able to get a few cycles in it, and it makes sense for you to kind of stack, maybe transfer it into stacking more sats or something like that. More power to you. There's a lot of it's like real-time PvP, right, of on the spec mining front, right? There's a lot of things out there that people enjoy, kind of spec mining, and it's kind of like getting those little gains here and there. I mean, you're tactically using your hardware for that. And I mean, sometimes it's just fun to like, I haven't been able to do this in a while, but like back in 16, 17, man, was just like setting when I was like updating the BBT multi-miner of like looking at what tokens are out there. Like, what are these different networks? What do they do? Where do they come from? What's my hash rate on this like weird, turtle, like algorithm, that kind of stuff. Crypto Night X7, like all these different things of just nerding out and seeing what this particular GPU would do on it, and and then throwing overnight the whole farm on it to see what it does.
The trend is different this time, which we have an interesting trend in new coins that I think is relevant. A lot of these new coins that are spinning up are going core heavy algorithms. You got kaspa, you got Alephium, shoot, there's a ton of them. I mean, it's either that right now or it's Bitcoin Cash forks. It seems to be that's the trend. Bitcoin Cash forks or new algorithms, newly developed algorithms that are focused on basically like high core clock, right? And that means that like obviously GPU mining doesn't go anywhere because it will always have that place to where you have to validate a network before it can have ASICs developed for it. I had the interview with the dev from Alephium. Was it last week, guys? I think it was maybe week before. And he was kind of talking about that. Like they're not going to prevent ASICs from going onto the network. At the same time, you can only mine it with GPUs right now. So there you go. That does mean that I think like GPU mining is not going to go anywhere. How about we get into some questions and answers? I know there's like
that's cool.
Quite a few going on here. We'll get get some stuff going in. So remember, everybody, super chats are never required, always appreciated. First to be answered because they're the easiest to read. If you'd like to ask a question, please tag @SonOfATech. It highlights the message orange. It makes it easier for me to read. So let's go ahead and get into it. Akuna Batata says, Son of Attack, I bought 20 P106s for $20 each. Did I waste my money? I mean, right now, I think the P106s actually do pretty good on DNX, and they don't take a lot of power. Mm-hmm. So if you just wanted to throw them on, and if they were only $20, you know, maybe not, you know, play with them.
Are they the 3 gig or 6 gig? Ask them that.
Oh, yeah, that's true, because DNX 3 gig's not very good. 6 gig is.
Yeah, the 6 gig ones, if you get $20, aren't bad.
Yeah, he didn't give us the dash, did he?
Yeah, the interesting thing with P106 is what I would tell the people is if you can find a functional 19 card, you know, Asus board that enables you to use all 19 slots. So if you, because the P106 is as long as you have 8 of them, you can have that in the first 6 position or the first 8 positions, and then you can fill in the other 11 with anything else, and now you can get the full use of that 19 card board. Because
I thought
board,
you could just get all 19 now, no matter what these days.
The last time I had checked it, unless they changed it, you could not do any. You needed the P106, P104, P102s to be the first 8.
No, you can do anything now.
Can you?
Yeah, I have the ASRock H110 Pro BTC. Like one of those.
Oh, right? the ASRock, the ASRock one was the 14 card, right?
Or the 12 card, yeah.
Yeah, the 12, right? You can do all 12 straight, but I'm talking the 19 card.
Okay.
The 19 card needs P102, P104, P106 for the first 8 to get 19.
Gotcha.
But the ASRock, yeah, you could always do.
That's right. Oh, well, I thought initially you had to split them up between AMD and NVIDIA for a while.
Yeah, you could use everything. You could have everything all NVIDIA. It was, so they had it hard coded in there that you needed to use those P106, P102, P104s to initialize all 19. So you could do 11 or you could do 13 with nothing. You know, you could get up to 13. And then there was a Linux upgrade if you're using Linux where you could get 15 out of them. And then Windows, it went to 14. So you needed to have those P106s. So it's nice to have if you can get like the cheap P106s and you have that board. It's the densest kind of setup without using expanders, you know, and you end up getting bifurcation issues. But like if you start using expanders on expanders type of thing, you end up getting some kind of errors. It'll look like it's working for a while, and then you'll start getting like those memory screen errors, right? Because it'll just start getting bifurcation issues. But yeah, that was one thing I would say about those. I mean, it helped to build a couple.
He said they're the 6 gigabytes. I mean, right now, that's actually one of the P106 6 gigabyte is, you know, the most profitable, one of the more profitable GPUs just off DNX. Like I said, DNX, I'm trying to figure out because of the way the algorithm works, you're not always making the same as what the calculators say. So there still needs to be some research in there. Because it's basically taking in a certain amount and then processing it and putting it back out. And the way it's solving those, the way it's getting solved is not making it as predictable as the calculator might make it sound like. But yeah, it's a 6 gigabyte card on DNX, which is profitable technically right now according to the calculator. So there's that. Thanks for the $10 super chat, Retro Mike. And then everybody's asking, so we're gonna get into it. Have you looked into kaspa, and are you interested, or do you have any formulated thoughts and opinions?
Honestly, I haven't. Like zero. I've helped a person that had a farm where they were trying to optimize. They had some L7s and kaspa boxes, but and we just helped them get set up with Awesome Miner and config things and get all their scripts set up. But no, I haven't really looked into it, to be honest with you. It's more of like, we went right from like fixing out and cleaning up and getting ready for the ETH transition straight into the Bitcoin farm. So it's just like, I kind of skipped over the whole kaspa piece, and just haven't really messed with it that much. We just haven't. It hasn't been a focus. But coming out of this farm, provided we're not building another one here soon, we got to look at some of our GPU stuff and have some more content around that. Just because
kaspa's not going to be it's already not GPU. I mean,
yeah, it's all the
FPGA.
ASICs.
Well, the ASICs aren't even actual ASICs. They're 3 FPGAs in a box, and they call it an ASIC. It's not an ASIC. They're FP35s? Is that what they're? I think is what's in those, in the ASIC ones, the Osprey ones. But it's gonna take a while for, I think kaspa to grow. That being said, like, kaspa is currently the fastest proof of work out, and with the Rust rewrite will be faster than Solana. At least that's what's claimed. And if that happens, that's pretty big, right? Most transactions per second. If you're king of most transactions per second, it's gonna be relevant. At least that's my thoughts and opinions on it.
You have to take a look at it. Yeah, we don't have any FPUs or FPGAs. I mean, I had a Grin box for a little bit, and then I think it was pointed to F2 pull, and then I just turned it off. I was like, I got to reconfigure this. After all the stuff with F2 pull, I was just like unplugged it. But that was the iPolo device, and then we have a couple of the ETC boxes from iPolo. And we were working with a guy here locally that supposedly had access to the Phoenix ETH miner from Silicon, because I just wanted to check it out and like open it up and see what was going on with it, because it was like 2.3 gigahash, which now you can point it to EPC. But then that kind of fell through. I just wanted to see what it was like, because it was supposedly it brought it in from you'd like had it in Hong Kong and then flew with it here, just to bring it in state, and you took it in his carry-on luggage, and they're like, oh, it's just a Bitcoin miner, like they, didn't know, and got it here. And then, I don't know if he just turned around and ended up selling it or what, but I was trying to get some eyes on, because it was for a long time. It was like,
I can get you some FPGAs if you want to play with them. I have one already running on kaspa, and then I have another 7 on order.
So does the Xilinx, like the 1525? I have one of the big Xilinx cards.
Yeah. Well, so for mining, these are, I can talk to you offline.
Yeah, we'll take a look. I mean, maybe that'd be a fun. Maybe that'd be a fun little like stream or something we can kind of work through, and just I like the crawl walk run. I haven't done one in a while, like a crawl walk run, like cradle to grave. Like, hey, like a lot of lessons learned or happened during that. So like if I'm learning something too, and we're like doing it together, and like we set it up, and like here's start to finish.
Team Red Miner just added, has been adding FPGA support, so it's pretty easy. Hive hasn't implemented any detectors or anything yet, but you can technically still run it, just turn on Team Red Miner and Hive just with the Ubuntu run commands and run it through there.
Nice.
So Jason says, as Habitat, given the fixed lifespan of ASIC hardware, how do you plan for equipment end of life at the Bitcoin farm?
So yeah, most of the stuff we have is anything from 96s to 104s and some 110. And we look at it like in a 3 years time span, and then to take an assessment of where things are at in the market. The one I know that there's going to be some stuff coming out from, I think I don't know if it's going to come out from CoinDesk or if it's the Compass Mining memo that comes out where they kind of talk about market stuff. But I know that there's people I know that have had some serious issues with the XPs. So that's the 140 terahash stuff. That XPs they're having some issues. There's a much more we don't have any, so I would love to report kind of our fail rates or any kind of thing like that, but we don't have any. But I'm hearing people are having some serious issues with them, which is questioning quality at that hash rate. I've heard some other issues like the WhatsMiner that are at like 136, and there's also Canon, which is the CANA in. miners that are like 130. It seems like all of the 5 nanometer stuff right now is having some issues. So I don't know if it's just rapid fabrication, if it's TMS or TCS or what is it? TSMC fabrication process is having a problem. Who knows, right? But like if it's anything like the S17s and the T19s that were having from Bitmain that had a huge fail rate, like 30% was like trash, and you had to like fix them. That's not good, which means now the S19s are falling into like the S9s where they're the workhorses. So if you think of how long it takes to fix like fabrication and all that kind of stuff, you're looking probably 24 plus months for them to kind of fix those issues. So at a minimum, depending on what Samsung ends up coming out with, what Intel's stuff, if it's sustainable. I know that some farms have the new Intel stuff, and it's a little less efficient than the Bitmain stuff. I think we're going to be strong for at least 36 months on the current hardware stack. And then we'll look at what the next iteration of like the 19s, the XP9, the XPs are going to be.
I only got one XP and it was broke. It was DOA.
Yeah, there's so I had an acquaintance that ended up getting 100 units, and he had 34 that had issues right out of the box. So like that's very, very high. That's concerningly high, right? So if you're talking like 6 Sigma, that's no bueno, right? So like 1 out of 100 is still bad, right? So like maybe 1 out of 1,000, maybe you're like, okay, maybe 2 out of 1,000. So we had on the 1,200 we had 2 kind of different shipments from them on the initial test. Like we took them out of the box, half were used, half were new. We had 3 of which 4. We had 4 total that we had issues with, like they wouldn't do things, and we were able to fix 3 of them, and then we had 1 that was just effectively DOA. There was nothing we could do. The board was dead, and we got that replaced. But like that was out of 1,200, so we had very good success with the 96s, 100s, 104s.
Well, and we talked about last week. I think it was I forgot what. I think it was CleanSpark bought a bunch of the 96 terahashes, and they're immersion cooling them.
Yeah, you can run them pretty good. So
they run it like 130 terahash a second immersed.
Yep. So on air, our best, and I'd have to log in TossMiner to take a look, but we have some 104s running at 136 on air because it's cool here right now. And they're staying around 62C. So the fact that they're running that, now we have Alpha Miner power supplies on those, and they're running right around 5,000 watts, I think, somewhere around there, running at 136. But that's 104. So I don't have 96s running that. 96s run around 124. But like they're pretty stable. The S19s are in solid shape on that standpoint. So we have there's a few that we got shipped that were 86s, and they're running good too. So I haven't had any real issues with any of them. And there's a whole, like I'm going to have a whole thing. We have about 4 videos that we need to get out of things that we've recorded for particular purposes. One of those videos I'm showing how we fix the range. Like in the back, I have all these little cards, and we've marked up, and I have 11 machines that were working, and now something's happened to them in some way. And most of them have been just easy fixes, like sliding a hash board out, sliding it back, switching positions. Maybe from the transport from here to there, something shook loose. It's just like anything. I always tell everybody, if you're not deploying where you've unboxed and stuff, and you transport, there's a chance that you're going to cause something. And it's just like a GPU miner. Think of all the people that are out there that have built GPU miners. You get it working for a friend or something, you pick it up, you put it in a car, you get it to their house, and then something doesn't work. And it's like, check the risers, check this, check ASICs, same kind of thing. Those boards get a little loose. You'll end up getting like an SOC int error, and it's saying can't find a hash board 2 or something. Most of the time, you pull that set of fans over, take the top off, unplug the hash board, slide it out, slide it back in, re-screw it back down, and it probably fixes your issue. Or do like a hard reset on it, reset up all your settings, and then everything magically starts working again. A lot of it's just like resetting. I was kind of keeping it ink until like the old like blowing in the cartridge on like a Nintendo, right? It's just like I don't know why it's not finding it, but all I had to do is reseat it and everything works. But Those kind of things are the issues that we're running into. And then, over time, I know I'm going to run into fan issues. Like, we have, 37,000 CFM fans, 21 of them per container. It's about 450,000 CFM. It's a ton of air movement that are assisting, the ASICs, so they don't have to, there's a good fresh air coming in.
Yeah.
But when we start getting some heat, those onboard fans are going to spin all the way up. Right now, they're, saying at 2,400, 2,200 RPM, not 6,000 RPM.
Right.
When we start seeing 6,000 RPM running all the time, we'll start popping fans about every 6 months, right? So there's this is one thing that I wanted to bring to the channel for a long time, is showing like the maintenance cycle. We kind of covered it with the GPU side. Like, we'd go up to the farm. You guys would see videos like every 8 months or whatever. I'd go up to the farm and we'd do our cleaning, do the, ultrasonic cleaning, that kind of thing, but try to be a little more understanding of the actual realities of like running a farm, right? Like the realities are, it's great. It's running right now. We have 1,200 machines deployed. I have 1,186 right now online, right? So like, why don't I have 1,200? Well, because things happen and we have to fix things. And I'll go out there after this weekend. There might be 1,170 online, and now I got to figure out like what went offline why this weekend. So there is a rotation that happens. It's a regular day, O&M type of activity, which is operations and maintenance, or operation and management, depending what field you're in. That it's a living, breathing thing, just like GPU mining is. Like, it's great, and then the weekend happens, and then for some reason the GPU stops working. So you get a little better with the ASICs because it's not as complex as the GPU mining, but you still have that cycle that you have to deal with.
Yeah. Thanks for the $9.99 super chat, Latrell. Glad you're enjoying this stream. Geek of All Trades asks, our thoughts on the Loco Tech hashboard thing. I'm not familiar with it. Are you familiar with this?
The what?
Loco Tech hashboard thing, he said. LOKOTECH hashboard thing.
If he's talking about like a reader that kind of gives you a readout, like we have one that we got from Scott Oxford, the PBT Todd went up there to do his training. And we bought the ant reader board, just to do
Did you buy the one that was it ASIC Ninja? Austin?
Yeah. So he picked up one of those, and we got a whole test bench thing with another power supply and all that. So we're trying to expand that.
Well, I was up there in October, I think. No, November. Yeah, I was up there like mid-November and went to their course and hung out with them. Cool guys. Those testers are super neat.
Yeah. And I mean, you end up finding like, I don't know.
There's a video on my channel, I think, of it, but
yeah, there's some serious, you start seeing like all the capacitors and all the little chips and stuff that are in there, and you're like, this is some real stuff, man. Like being able to fix some of those boards and fix the hash boards, and being able to understand that like you just can't put a hash board from one machine to another because they have like a serial connection with each other. Like there's a symbiosis to it. Like they're symbolically connected to the controller, and they do that for reasons, for people aren't just like you get a bad one and then you're sending all the bad stuff in this one machine, and it's like, oh, it's got 3 bad hash boards and a bad controller. This was a terrible machine, and it's like they're trying to prevent you from slipping, and replacing, right? So kind of the old micro center that you accidentally, when you took the little plastic piece off, you dented all the socket, pins, and you're in it. I don't know what's wrong with it. It doesn't work, so now they're looking at the sockets whenever you're giving it back to them.
For everybody reading later, apparently the Loco Tech miner is a script miner. It's a PCI hash board. I haven't heard of it. I'm gonna have to look at it. So I don't have any opinions. People are thinking it's a rug pull, but I mean, like, don't buy it till somebody has it and reviews it, I guess, right? I mean, that's the same with anything in this industry, right?
I mean, no,
like the amount of scam sites I bought ASICs from to test before I found good sponsors was like, it was stupid, guys. I lost like a lot of money trying to find out which just people would actually ship miners and not steal from you, right?
Yep. I learned pretty quick. I mean, I still have the email confirmation when I had sent 10.7 Bitcoin to buy the KNC Titan and never got it. I had people that got it. I never got mine. KNC went under by the time it was time for them to ship me one, and it was 10 Bitcoin.
Damn.
And it kills me to this day. But you know, I laugh also with, you know, when we were buying the there's that dual GPU, the old was it the RX no, it was the R290X2 GPUs, the big thick boys. I had the double 13s. I bought those with Bitcoin. Bitcoin was $600 a coin at the time, and those cards were $1,200, and I bought 8 of them. So you could do the math. It was on Newegg. It was a Newegg transaction, which ended up making, and then I bought the board and a couple other things, and like I want to say that was like 13 after the power supply, because I had bought 2 of the 1600 T2 power supplies, and those things were like 500 a piece. All this. It was a 13. It was funny because I remember taking the screenshot. It was 13.37. And I remember going, hey, look, I spent leet. Like for this thing. And now I look at it like I was 13.37 Bitcoin for 8 GPUs. Or no, it was 6 GPUs at the time. And then all the other stuff that it took. And it was like the most expensive rig in history. Like, because I bought it in Bitcoin. And you know, it's what it is. You know, you just have those experiences and you're like, you know what? I have that history. It's on the YouTube channel from 2015 or 2014. And it is what it is. Like you got to put that mark and then move on. But yeah, there's been being early in the game when it was amazing. I was like, oh my God, it's $600 Bitcoin. I can finally buy these GPUs. Like yeah, you know.
No. Definitely.
Yeah, it was R9 295 X2s. They were 290s. So the double 13s were RX 290 X2s. And then they did have a 295 X2, which was water cooled.
I had the water cooled one. I had the 295 X2.
Yep.
God, it was so buggy.
Yeah, there
like
was.
To actually play games on it, it was buggy as shit.
Yeah.
Geek of All Trades says, "That's something. If you could go back, what would you change about running a mining pool and why?" That's an interesting question. I don't think I would change anything because I learned the lessons I needed to learn, and I don't think that the people the thing is like the lessons that I learned that we learned were lessons that had not been learned by anybody yet, really, right? So. You know, it's one of those things. I think mining pools are extremely hard to build up, maintain, scale out, and actually make profitable, right? Because the competition's so high. You know, and then on top of that, if you're just trying to do it with a couple dudes, then, you know, we were out. We spent so much time just trying to run those things, you know, up till 4, 5, 6 in the morning, and then going to work at 7 a.m. Like, and I did it with a coworker, and like, it was fun. We learned a shit ton. Like, I'm really fucking good at Linux now, but I wouldn't try to do it again unless I had like a team. I think that would be the biggest lesson. Would be you need a team. That's just it. You have to have basically a 24/7 IT team ready to go on call.
Yeah, there's investment of time on pools. I mean, because it's other people's money. You know, you're running a service, but you're running a service that is responsible for a finite amount of time on the security in a hot wallet. And there's
and it's a very hot wallet.
It's a very hot wallet with an IP, and even if you have it, you know, with some kind of front end routing. To protect it, even if it's load balance behind an F5, you name whatever architecture you want to do. If you're taking advantage of it, hosting it on a cloud where you can have some level of protection, you know, built in, running through Cloudflare, whatever, DNS protection, all you know,
we were
denial of service protection,
Rio, yeah.
Yep.
Rio is like we had the front end in the cloud and it was load balanced, and then we had on premises infrastructure in like 3 locations that it would route everybody to, depending on where
Mhm.
you're at. And but yeah, like I think it was the Pearl pool when we stood that up. I lost $14,000 on that fucking pool because
Mhm.
somebody just got straight in through to there was a RPC
Mhm.
vulnerability that my coworker didn't plug up. We were kind of aware of it. We didn't get it plugged
Mhm.
up in time, and it drained basically $14,000. And then that was also then the bear market hit right after that, and I was like, you know what, kind of failed. And then you just try again. It is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's things that there's, especially on the like cyber side, and just understanding when people start to really understand, like if they get even, I mean, hopefully they don't get local access to it, but there's all kinds of tools on, like if you just take a download of Kali Linux and spend about an hour with it, and you'll start to learn about tools about like Jekyll and Hyde and stuff like that, to where it's like they'll deploy and find a vulnerability. They'll use Metasploit and all these different online OSINT resources to find vulnerabilities, and they're just scanners, man. They'll
And if you're
find a
just trying,
hole.
if you're trying to do all the new coins, and you're
Hmm.
trying, like, there's vulnerabilities built within these, like within the nodes, like that's the problem, right? Like, because people will be like, well, you could stand up one. I could stand up a pool for a brand new coin, but like, what vulnerabilities are built into that code that is gonna, I'm screwed.
Hmm.
I don't have. I'm not gonna be able to sit there and go through like the entire Rust code to make sure that I'm not gonna get screwed on that, right? For whatever it
Hmm.
is. So it's. I mean, I think I would definitely also probably hire like somebody that's proficient in whatever code the crypto is built on
Hmm.
top of.
Yeah, and most people aren't using, like if you look at current pools, they're built from the ground up. So
Yeah.
it gives any kind of would be hacker, it gives them a disadvantage because now it's freshly mint, freshly new code, and
Right.
they're having to figure out, like, was this a fork for something, or did somebody just start writing it from scratch, side by side looking at a screen. They didn't necessarily fork the
Yeah.
particular repository. They just took some of the goodness out of one that you don't know, and then now you got a whole other level of complexity to try to punch through. And now you're just hitting the edges to try to figure out if you can get a connection that's not,
And that's the
been
best way to
closed,
do it. You would want to build
right?
any of it from the ground up for sure.
Yeah, you build it from the ground up. You get a person that's good with understanding on how the basic framework it is, or you get a really, really strong front, full stack developer, and then point him to, like, I want something that looks like this, and then here's some code that kind of represents it, but don't use that.
Yeah.
Like, but it gives them the framework, and then they can create epics of, like, okay, here's the way the wallet handles. This is the way the daemon's going to work locally.
Right.
Do I want to have that in its own VM? Am I going to structure that as all running on a machine? So yeah, you really need, from an architecture standpoint, you need like the right resources that can
And
kind
there's
of
a
break
ton that
that
goes
up.
into it. Like you're talking about, like the wallet's hot, but you can lock the wallet until payments process, unlock the wallet, and you automate
Hmm.
all, like we would automate unlocking the wallet and processing the payments, and then relocking the wallet. And
Hmm.
it's just like there's constantly something to do. And then if you got to get into development for it, then it's just going to take, I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
like
the
that's a
development.
great, like if anybody wants to work on something though in the bear market, they can't afford to mine because electricity's too high, and you got some GPUs, start building pools and understanding like how that works, because there will be a need for those developers in the future, right?
Hmm.
That's an opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely. People are like, hey man, this is a long stream. Yeah, we've been going for a bit.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go get a burger or something, dude.
Yeah, I'm gonna be getting back. I'm taking the kiddos to a bowl tomorrow.
Nice.
So I was running over. So we were supposed to start, I think, at 7 Central, but I had to go pick up something fun to drive for the weekend. So
Nice. What are you driving?
the new Lambo Huracan Evo.
Oh shit. Cool. Send some
I'll throw it
pictures.
on, I'll throw it on Twitter.
I'm still driving my old Chevy. It hasn't broke yet.
I just pick it up. I partners with a couple different businesses, but one of them is a
I think I've
the
seen
exotic
pictures.
car company.
That's cool.
Yeah, I sent it in there. It's one of those bull market plays that I was just like, maybe diversify a little bit. And I'm not like, I love cars. I was a big car person before crypto. Like I would go to autocross and do all the other stuff. That was my passion. And instead of owning those, I was like, well, maybe I just invest in a company that's what they do. So then I can go grab a plate and take whatever I want when I want it, and I don't have to own it. So I just every once in a while I'll grab something that's fun and enjoy it for a weekend, and then I don't have to worry about the maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So
hell yeah, cool.
But yeah, I'll throw it on Twitter.
Make sure you guys go subscribe to Bits on YouTube. Link down in the description. You can check them out on Twitter at Bitsbetrippin. And thanks for coming on, man. I think this is one of the most fun streams I've had in a long time. So thank you.
It was good, man. It was fun. It was fun to get back. Thanks for having me, man. It's like I hadn't had a stream or been part of a stream in almost 8 weeks. So I know a lot of people are like, "What the hell's going on?" So it was good to get back in it, man.
Cool.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, have a good one. We'll see you guys next Tuesday.
See you, my dudes.